The heat in Mogadishu could kill you before the bullets ever got the chance. Staff Sergeant Raymond Bishop had learned that truth the hard way during his first week in Somalia, watching a private from Kentucky collapse in full gear, dead from heat stroke before the medic could reach him. Now pinned down behind a bullet-riddled wall with gunfire tearing through the air above his head, Bishop found himself wishing the heat was his biggest problem. Beside him, Sergeant First Class Jack Callahan pressed his back against the crumbling concrete, his Marine Corps uniform dark with sweat and dust. The man was 12 years older than Bishop, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many deployments, too many firefights, too many friends buried. But his hands stayed steady as he changed magazines, and his voice carried the kind of calm that could slow your heartbeat even when the world was ending around you. "How many you count on the roof?" Callahan asked. "3, maybe 4. Bishop risked a glance around the corner and immediately jerked back as concrete chips exploded inches from his face. "Make that 4. They got good fields of fire from up there." Callahan nodded slowly, studying the street ahead with the careful attention of a man who had survived by noticing details other people missed. The Black Hawk wreckage was 200 meters away, still smoking, the bodies of the crew scattered around it like broken dolls. Their mission had been simple in the briefing room back at base. Extract the downed helicopter crew, get them to safety, come home. Simple on paper. Suicide in practice. "We can't reach them," Bishop said. "Not with that crossfire. We need air support or armor or something other than our rifles and good intentions." Callahan pulled a photograph from his vest pocket, creased and worn from 1,000 viewings. Bishop had seen it before. A girl, maybe 11 years old, gap-toothed smile holding up a soccer ball. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her father's eyes. "That's Katie," Callahan said quietly, though Bishop already knew. "My daughter, smart as hell, wants to join the army when she grows up. I told her girls can't serve in combat roles. She told me that was stupid and she was going to change it." Bishop found himself smiling despite everything. "Sounds like her old man, stubborn, runs in the family." Callahan tucked the photo back into his vest, right over his heart. "I made her a promise before I left. Told her I'd come home, told her I'd never take a mission that wasn't worth dying for." "This one worth it?" Bishop asked. Callahan looked toward the wreckage, toward the Americans who would die without help, toward the impossible distance they would have to cross under fire. "Every mission's worth it when it's our guys out there. That's the job, Ray. We don't leave anyone behind. Even if it kills us? Especially then." Callahan checked his rifle one more time, his movements precise and unhurried. "You got family back home?" "2 daughters. Bishop felt the weight of it in his chest. Jennifer's 6, Sarah's 4. "My wife sends pictures every week. They draw me crayon letters. Then you know why we do this. We fight so they don't have to. We die so they can live in a world where little girls grow up safe. That's the whole game right there." Bishop wanted to argue, wanted to point out that dying in Mogadishu wouldn't make his daughters any safer, that sometimes the mission wasn't worth the cost, that smart soldiers knew when to pull back and wait for support. But he looked at Callahan's face, at the absolute certainty there, and understood that some men were built different. Some men had a code that didn't bend for convenience or survival. "I'll cover you," Bishop heard himself say. "You make the run to that building at 10 o'clock. Get an angle on that roof position." Callahan studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "When you have kids, you'll understand. There's no choice that matters more than doing the right thing, even when it costs everything." He moved before Bishop could respond, breaking from cover in a low sprint that carried him across 15 meters of open ground in seconds. Bishop opened fire on the roof position, controlled bursts that kept heads down, and gave Callahan the seconds he needed. The older man made it to the building, pressed against the wall, gave Bishop a thumbs up. That's when Bishop saw the muzzle flash from the second-story window, 20 meters behind Callahan. Perfect angle, American weapon, M4 by the sound. His radio crackled with a voice he recognized from command. "Handle it." 2 words, cold and final. Bishop's rifle was already moving, his training taking over before his mind could catch up. His finger found the trigger. The scope found the target. Callahan's back filled his vision. 10 seconds. That's how long Raymond Bishop had to decide. 10 seconds to choose between the orders coming through his radio and the man who had just shared his daughter's photograph. 10 seconds to weigh his career against another man's life. 10 seconds to remember his own daughters. Safe at home because he followed orders, because he didn't ask questions, because he survived. He pulled the trigger. The round caught Callahan high in the back, between the shoulder blades, and dropped him instantly. Through the scope, Bishop saw the man's hand reach for the photograph over his heart, saw his lips move in words that might have been his daughter's name, saw the light leave his eyes. Bishop lowered his rifle. His hand shook. The radio crackled again. Confirmed. Good work. Extraction in 5. Around him, the battle continued. Gunfire and explosions and men screaming. But Raymond Bishop knelt behind that wall in Mogadishu and understood with perfect clarity that he had just murdered his friend. Not in the heat of combat, not by accident, but deliberately, coldly, because a voice on the radio told him to. He thought about his daughters, about crayon letters, about coming home to them with blood on his hands they would never see. He thought about Callahan's daughter, the girl who wanted to change the world, who would grow up thinking her father died a hero. And he knew he would carry this moment until the day he died. The sound of boots on concrete pulled Major Katherine Callahan from sleep at 0530, same as every morning for the past 20 years. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of her quarters at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, counting the cracks in the plaster she had memorized during countless insomniac nights. 42 cracks, the same 42 that had been there when she made Major 3 years ago. The same 42 that would still be there when she retired, assuming she lived that long. She sat up, swung her legs out of bed, winced at the familiar ache in her left knee where Iraqi shrapnel had torn through muscle and cartilage back in 2006. The doctors had done good work. She could still run, still fight, still pass every physical test the Army threw at her. But the knee remembered what the doctors couldn't fix. The knee kept count of every price she had paid. Her morning routine had the precision of ritual. 10 minutes of stretching, 5 minutes in the shower, never longer, 2 minutes to dress in her PT uniform, the black Army shirt and gray shorts that marked her as just another soldier preparing for another day. She tied her boots with the same over and under pattern her father had taught her when she was 8 years old before he deployed to Somalia, before he came home in a flag-draped coffin. The pre-dawn darkness outside felt appropriate somehow. Kate had always preferred the quiet hours before the world woke up, when Fort Bragg belonged to the dedicated and the desperate. She stepped out of her quarters and started running, her breath misting in the cool October air, her footfalls steady and rhythmic on the asphalt. 10 miles, the same distance she ran every morning, the same route past the same buildings, the same memorial walls, the same parade grounds where countless soldiers had stood at attention over the decades. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, every tree, every sight line. This place was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. Other soldiers joined her as the sun began its slow climb. Younger men and women, some barely out of their teens, running in formation and calling cadence. They gave her space. Everyone at Fort Bragg knew Major Callahan. 20 years in service. Delta Force operator. 2 combat tours in Iraq. 1 in Afghanistan. Widow of a Marine Corps officer killed by an IED outside Fallujah. Daughter of a Force Recon Marine who died a hero in Mogadishu. They knew her reputation. What they didn't know was how tired she was, how every morning she had to talk herself into getting out of bed, how the weight of 2 decades in uniform pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing, how she sometimes wondered what her life might have looked like if her father had lived, if her husband had come home, if she had chosen any other path. But she kept running, because that's what soldiers did. They ran until their bodies broke or their time ran out. The dining facility at 0600 was a study in controlled chaos. 200 soldiers moving through the breakfast line, grabbing trays of eggs and bacon and toast, finding seats with their units, talking and laughing with the easy camaraderie of people who trusted each other with their lives. Kate moved through it all like a ghost, filling her tray with oatmeal and black coffee, scanning for an empty table. She found Colonel Raymond Bishop sitting alone in the corner, working through a stack of paperwork while he ate. The man looked older than his 58 years, his hair gone completely silver, deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth. But his uniform was immaculate, his posture parade ground perfect, and his eyes held the same sharp awareness she remembered from her first day in Delta Force selection. Bishop had been her father's friend, one of the last people to see Jack Callahan alive in Mogadishu. For 20 years, he had been a constant presence in Kate's military career, always appearing at the right moments with the right advice, always pushing her to be better, always treating her with a respect that most male officers struggled to manage. She owed him more than she could ever repay. She sat down across from him without asking. He glanced up, smiled, gestured at his paperwork. "Morning, Katie. Sleep well?" "Like the dead, sir." She took a sip of coffee, bitter and scalding. "You?" Bishop set down his pen, studied her with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I've been having this dream. Same one for the past few months. I'm back in Mogadishu, October 3rd, 1993, the day the Blackhawks went down." Kate felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had heard Bishop's version of that day a dozen times, how he and her father had been pinned down, how Jack Callahan had made a heroic run to flank an enemy position, how he had been killed by enemy fire, how Bishop had held him while he died. The official story, the version that made her father a hero. "Bad dreams?" she asked quietly. "Something like that." Bishop pushed his eggs around his plate without eating. "Your father said something to me that day, right before he moved. He said there's no choice that matters more than doing the right thing, even when it costs everything." Sounds like him. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." Bishop looked up, met her eyes. "About choices, about costs, about whether the things we do in the name of duty are worth what we sacrifice." Kate felt the conversation shifting into dangerous territory, the kind of philosophical discussion that soldiers usually avoided because it led to questions without good answers. She changed the subject. "6 months until retirement, sir. You must be counting the days." "I was." Bishop's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now I'm not so sure I'll make it that long." Before Kate could ask what he meant, Sergeant Major Thomas Garrett dropped his tray on the table and sat down with the casual confidence of a man who had earned his place through 3 decades of service. Garrett was everything a senior enlisted soldier should be. Rock solid, unshakable, the kind of man younger soldiers wanted to become. He looked at Bishop, then at Kate, and frowned. "Did I interrupt something? Because you two look like someone died." "Not yet," Bishop said softly, "but the day's young." The briefing room hummed with the controlled energy of elite operators preparing for a mission. Kate stood near the back wall, studying the faces of the 12 Delta Force soldiers who would form her team. She knew most of them, had trained with them, had bled with them in the deserts of the Middle East. But she also knew what they thought when they saw her. Diversity hire, token female, box to check for the brass worried about optics. She had heard the whispers, seen the skeptical looks, felt the weight of having to prove herself over and over, while men with half her experience got automatic respect. 20 years hadn't changed that. It had only taught her to ignore it and let her work speak louder than their doubts. Captain Dylan Cross stood near the front, lean and confident in the way of soldiers who had never failed at anything. Ranger Regiment before Delta, 3 combat deployments, 36 years old and already being groomed for command. He caught Kate's eye and gave a nod that was just barely respectful enough to avoid insubordination. She returned it with the same cold courtesy. The room fell silent when General Marcus Sheridan appeared on the video screen at the front. The man was 64 years old but carried himself like someone 20 years younger. Square jaw, steel gray hair cut military short, 4 stars on his collar, and the bearing of someone who had spent his entire adult life giving orders that people followed without question. Sheridan had been a legend long before he became National Security Advisor. Delta Force in the 80s and 90s. BIA liaison during the first Gulf War. Pentagon during Afghanistan and Iraq. He had the kind of resume that intimidated even senior officers. When he spoke, everyone listened. "Good morning." Sheridan's voice carried the crisp authority of command. "I'm going to brief you on a time-sensitive situation that requires immediate action. Ambassador Charles Whitmore, along with 6 American contractors, has been taken hostage by an insurgent group operating along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border." A map appeared on the screen behind him, showing terrain Kate knew too well. Mountains and valleys where armies went to die. Territory that had defeated everyone from Alexander the Great to the Soviet Union to America itself. Whitmore was on a diplomatic mission when his convoy was ambushed 3 days ago. The hostage takers are demanding $100 million in the release of 20 prisoners currently held at Bagram. They've given us 72 hours before they begin executing hostages. Sheridan's face hardened. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We extract our people. Major Callahan will lead this operation. Captain Cross will serve as second in command. Sergeant Major Garrett will handle senior enlisted oversight. You have 12 hours to plan, equip, and deploy. The screen changed to satellite imagery of a compound nestled in a mountain valley. Kate studied it carefully, noting the approaches, the sight lines, the defensive positions. Something felt wrong. The compound was too exposed. The terrain offered multiple infiltration routes. For terrorists holding high-value hostages, the security looked amateurish. Sir, Kate spoke up, do we have confirmation on the identity of the hostage takers? Intelligence indicates they're affiliated with a splinter group of the Taliban, former ISI-trained operatives, highly capable. That doesn't match the defensive posture, Kate continued. This compound is vulnerable from at least 3 directions. Professional operators would never choose this location. Sheridan's eyes fixed on her, and for just a moment, Kate saw something flicker across his face. Irritation, maybe, or calculation. It passed so quickly she might have imagined it. Your concern is noted, Major. The intelligence has been thoroughly vetted. You have your mission. Execute it. The screen went dark. Bishop, who had been standing quietly to the side, caught Kate's eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. A warning. She filed it away and turned to her team. All right, people. We have work to do. The equipment room smelled like gun oil and old canvas, familiar scents that had followed Kate through 2 decades of military service. She moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking her gear with the methodical care that kept soldiers alive. Primary weapon, M4 carbine with ACOG sight. Secondary Glock 19. Combat knife. Tourniquets, extra magazines, every piece of equipment tested and verified. Sergeant Major Garrett worked beside her, his hands moving through the same rituals he had performed thousands of times. The man had been in the Army longer than Kate had been alive. He had served in Desert Storm, Somalia, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq. Every major American conflict of the past 3 decades. And he had known her father. Bull, Kate said quietly, using the nickname everyone called him. Can I ask you something about Mogadishu? Garrett's hands stilled for just a moment, then continued their work. 20 years you've waited to ask. Figured this day would come eventually. My father. The official report says he was killed by enemy fire during a rescue attempt. But I've read the after-action reviews. Something doesn't add up. What doesn't add up? The angles. Kate pulled out a folded map she had carried for years, marked with positions and trajectories she had calculated from witness statements and ballistic reports. He was shot from behind, high in the back. The entry wound suggests American ammunition, not AK rounds. Garrett was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Kate's chest tight. Your father was the best man I ever knew. Brave, honest, the kind of soldier who made everyone around him better. And he died trying to do the right thing. That's not an answer, Bull. No, it's not. Garrett met her eyes, and Kate saw something in them she had never seen before. Pain, old and deep. But it's the only answer I can give you. Not because I don't trust you, but because some truths are too dangerous for the people who carry them. Before Kate could press him, Captain Cross appeared in the doorway. Major, we need to finalize the infill plan. You have a minute? Kate looked at Garrett, who had already turned back to his equipment. The conversation was over. She followed Cross to the planning room where maps and satellite photos covered every surface. I've been studying the target, Cross said. I think we should go in fast and loud. Hit them at dawn with maximum force. Shock and awe. Kate shook her head. This isn't Iraq. These mountains swallow loud operations. We go in quiet, 2 clicks out, then close on foot. Approach from the east where the terrain gives us cover. That adds 3 hours to the mission timeline. It also keeps us alive. Kate pointed to the map. Look at this compound. It's too exposed, too vulnerable. Either these hostage takers are incompetent or we're missing something. Cross studied the map, frowning. You think it's a trap? I think something's off. Kate pulled up the satellite imagery again, examining every detail. And when something's off, quiet and careful beats fast and loud. You're the boss, Cross said, but she heard the doubt in his voice. Just remember, we have 72 hours. Clock's ticking. After he left, Kate sat alone with the maps and photos, trying to see what her instincts were screaming at her. She thought about her father, about Bishop's strange mood at breakfast, about Garrett's refusal to tell her the truth about Mogadishu, about Sheridan's reaction when she questioned the intelligence. Pieces of a puzzle she didn't understand yet, but she would. She always did. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bishop. Need to see you. Private. Urgent. She found him in his office, door closed, blinds drawn. He looked older than he had at breakfast, like the hours between had added years to his face. He gestured for her to sit, then stood staring out the window for a long moment before he spoke. Katie, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 20 years ago. She waited, her heart suddenly pounding. This mission, it's not what Sheridan says it is. What do you mean? Ambassador Whitmore isn't being held hostage. He's being protected. Protected from who? Bishop turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes. From us, from Sheridan, from people who want him dead because he's about to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee. About what? Bishop pulled a file from his desk drawer, set it in front of her. The classification markings were so high, Kate had never seen some of them before. When you get to Whitmore, ask him about Echo Protocol. Ask him what happened in 1991 during the Gulf War. Then you'll understand. Understand what? That your father didn't die in combat. Bishop's voice broke. He was murdered by someone he trusted because he was going to expose something that powerful people needed to stay buried. Kate felt the world tilt. Her hands gripped the desk to steady herself. Who killed him? Bishop closed his eyes. I did. The C-130 transport aircraft thrummed with mechanical thunder as it carried them through the darkness toward their drop zone. Kate sat strapped into the web seating along the fuselage wall, watching her team prepare for the halo jump that would take them from 25,000 feet to hostile territory below. 12 soldiers, 12 parachutes, 12 lives depending on her leadership. She had barely spoken since Bishop's confession. The man had told her everything in his office, about Echo Protocol, about orders to eliminate CIA assets who knew too much, about Jack Callahan's refusal to murder innocent scientists, about the choice Bishop had made in Mogadishu, about 30 years of guilt and silence. Then he had given her the data drive containing everything, every document, every order, every name, and he had told her to finish what her father started. But first, she had to survive this mission. Sergeant Major Garrett had sat across from her, his face calm despite the insanity of what they were about to do. Jump from a perfectly good aircraft in the middle of the night into mountains controlled by people who wanted them dead. It was the kind of mission that made sense only to people who had made a career of doing impossible things. Captain Cross moved through the team, checking equipment with the thoroughness of a man who understood that small details killed soldiers. He caught Kate's eye, gave a thumbs up. Whatever doubts he had about her leadership, he kept them professional. That was something. The jump master gave the 10-minute warning. Kate stood, began her own equipment check. Parachute, oxygen, weapons. The file Bishop had given her, sealed in waterproof casing and secured in her vest. The weight of her father's murder pressed against her chest with every breath. She thought about the photograph Jack Callahan had carried. The one of her at 11 years old with the gap-toothed smile and the soccer ball. She wondered if her father had been thinking about that photo when Bishop shot him. If his last thought had been of the daughter who would grow up without him. 5 minutes, Kate moved to the ramp at the rear of the aircraft. Wind screamed past the opening, 40 below zero at this altitude, the kind of cold that killed exposed skin in seconds. Below, the mountains of Afghanistan waited in darkness. Somewhere down there, Ambassador Whitmore was either a hostage or a protected witness, depending on which version of reality was true. Somewhere down there, answers waited about Echo Protocol and her father's death and 30 years of lies. 1 minute. The jumpmaster's hand came down. Green light flooded the cargo bay. Kate stepped into the void. The free fall lasted 90 seconds that felt like hours. The world reduced to wind and darkness, and the altimeter on her wrist counting down to the moment when she would pull her chute and hope the nylon deployed properly. She had made hundreds of jumps in her career. It never got easier. It never stopped being a controlled fall toward death with only skill and equipment standing between. At 4,000 feet, she pulled. The chute deployed with a crack that jerked her upward, slowing her descent from terminal velocity to something survivable. Around her, the rest of her team's chutes blossomed against the stars. 12 soldiers descending into hostile territory with nothing but their training and each other. Kate steered toward the landing zone, a flat area 2 kilometers from the target compound. The terrain below was invisible in the darkness, but her night vision showed the outlines of rocks and vegetation rushing up to meet her. She hit hard, rolled, came up already gathering her chute and moving to the rally point. 11 other shadows joined her, everyone accounted for. No injuries. Captain Cross gave the hand signal for movement, and they began the slow, careful approach toward whatever waited at the compound. The 2-kilometer movement took an hour. Kate led from the front, using terrain and darkness for cover, stopping frequently to listen and observe. This was the part of special operations that no one talked about. Not the firefights or the explosions, but the patience stalking through hostile ground, where every step might be your last, and silence was the only thing keeping you alive. Sergeant Major Garrett moved behind her like a ghost despite his size. The man had spent 30 years learning to be invisible when it mattered. He tapped her shoulder, pointed to marks in the dirt, fresh footprints, multiple people, moving in patrol patterns. Kate examined them carefully. The tread pattern was wrong. Not local boots, not insurgent footwear. These were military issue, American military issue. She signaled Cross forward, showed him the prints. He studied them, frowned, looked at her with new understanding. You were right. Something's wrong here. They continued forward until they reached the observation point overlooking the compound. Kate pulled out her spotting scope and began the careful work of intelligence gathering. Count the enemy, note their positions, identify their weapons, build a picture of what they were walking into. What she saw made her blood run cold. The compound below held 12 armed men, but they weren't moving like insurgents. They were moving like professionals, military trained, precise patrol patterns, proper tactical spacing, American weapons, American gear. She handed the scope to Garrett. He looked, swore quietly. Those aren't terrorists, he whispered. Those are operators. Our guys. Kate pulled out her satellite phone, typed a message to Lieutenant Sarah Chen back at the Tactical Operations Center. Need facial recognition on compound personnel. Sending images now. The response came back in minutes. Kate read it twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. Major, one of the hostage takers just pinged in our database. Robert McKenna, former CIA Special Activities Division, retired 2015. Current status unknown. Kate lowered the phone. Bishop had been right. This wasn't a hostage rescue, this was something else entirely. She keyed her radio back to the Tactical Operations Center. Requesting mission abort. Need clarification from command before proceeding. The response came not from Chen, but from General Sheridan himself, his voice cold and final. Negative, Major Callahan. Mission proceeds as briefed. That is a direct order. Kate looked at her team. They had all heard the transmission. 12 soldiers watching her, waiting to see what she would do. Follow orders that might lead them into a trap, or refuse and face court-martial. Captain Cross moved beside her. Major, what are your orders? Kate thought about her father, about the choice he had made in Baghdad when ordered to kill innocent people, about the price he had paid for doing the right thing. She keyed her radio one more time. Understood, sir. Mission proceeding, but we're doing this my way. She turned to her team, saw understanding in their faces. They knew what she was really saying. We're going in, but we're finding the truth whatever it costs. Sergeant Major Garrett smiled grimly. Hooyah, Major. We're with you. Kate began issuing orders, her voice steady despite the fear and anger and grief swirling inside her. They would approach the compound, but they would do it carefully. They would make contact. They would find out what was really happening. And then they would decide who deserved to die. The sun was beginning to rise over the mountains as Kate and Garrett approached the compound gates, weapons lowered but ready, hands visible. Behind them, hidden in the rocks, the rest of the team waited with rifles trained on the compound. If this went wrong, at least some of them might survive to tell the truth. Kate keyed her radio. We are United States military. We need to speak with Ambassador Whitmore. We are not hostile. Repeat, not hostile. For 60 seconds, nothing happened. Kate felt sweat running down her back despite the cold, felt her finger resting on the trigger guard of her rifle, felt the weight of Bishop's data drive pressing against her chest. Then the gate opened. A man stepped out. Late 50s, gray hair, weathered face. He held an M4 rifle with the casual competence of someone who had been holding weapons his entire adult life. His eyes met Kate's, and she saw recognition there. Major Callahan, he said quietly. I was wondering when you'd show up. You know me? The man smiled sadly. Your father saved my life once. Mogadishu, 1993. Jack Callahan was the best man I ever met. Least I can do is not shoot his daughter. Kate felt her throat tighten. You're Robert McKenna. Was. Now I'm just a retired operator trying to protect an old man who made the mistake of growing a conscience. Ambassador Whitmore, McKenna nodded. He's inside, along with 5 other former CIA operators and 6 civilians who really were taken hostage by people who wanted Whitmore dead. We've been keeping them all safe, waiting for someone like you to show up and complicate everything. I need to speak with him. McKenna studied her for a long moment. Your father died trying to expose what Whitmore's about to testify about. You ready to finish what Jack started? Kate thought about the photograph her father had carried, about Bishop's tears, about 30 years of lies. I've been ready my whole life. McKenna stepped aside. Then welcome to the war your father couldn't win. Maybe his daughter can. Kate and Garrett followed him into the compound, into whatever truth waited inside, into the choice that would define the rest of her life. Behind her, the sun continued to rise over the mountains, indifferent to the human drama playing out below. Another day in Afghanistan, another mission that might be someone's last. Kate Callahan walked forward toward the answers she had been seeking for 20 years and wondered if knowing the truth would be worth the price she would have to pay. The door closed behind them. Inside, an old man waited, a man who knew what her father had died to protect, a man who held the key to everything. Ambassador Charles Whitmore looked up as she entered, and Kate saw in his eyes the same haunted look she had seen in Bishop's, the look of a man carrying too many secrets for too many years. He stood slowly, arthritic joints protesting, gestured to a chair. Major Callahan, I've been expecting you. Your father was a good man, better than the rest of us, better than he knew. Kate sat, felt Garrett's solid presence behind her, felt the weight of her team waiting outside. Tell me about Echo Protocol, she said. Tell me why my father had to die. Whitmore's face aged 10 years in a moment, because he refused to become what I became, a murderer hiding behind a flag. And he began to talk. The room smelled of stale coffee and old fear. Ambassador Charles Whitmore sat in a wooden chair that had seen better decades, his hands folded in his lap with the careful stillness of a man who had learned to conserve energy for battles that mattered. At 71 years old, he carried his age in the deep lines around his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands. But his voice, when he spoke, held the clarity of someone who had finally decided to tell the truth. Major Katherine Callahan sat across from him, her body coiled tight despite the casual posture. Behind her, Sergeant Major Garrett stood like a sentinel, his presence both protection and witness. Through the cracked window, she could see her team establishing a defensive perimeter around the compound, professional and efficient, even in the uncertainty of a mission that had already gone sideways. Ambassador, Kate said quietly, you need to tell me about Echo Protocol, all of it, starting with why my father had to die. Whitmore looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or regret. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a photograph so worn the edges had gone soft. He held it out to her. Kate took it with careful fingers. The image showed 2 men in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at the camera with the easy confidence of soldiers who believed they were invincible. One of them was her father, younger than she had ever known him, his face unlined by the weight that would come later. The other man she didn't recognize at first, but then she saw the eyes and understood. Colonel Bishop, she said. This was taken in Baghdad, February 1991. Whitmore's voice carried the weight of 33 years, right before everything went to hell. What happened in Baghdad? Whitmore stood slowly, moved to the window, stared out at the mountains that had witnessed so much blood over so many years. What happened was that a group of men, myself included, made a decision to sacrifice 6 innocent people for what we told ourselves was the greater good. And your father was the only one brave enough to say no. He turned back to face her, and Kate saw tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. I was CIA Director of Operations in 1990. Not the director, not yet, but high enough to know things that kept me awake at night. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, we saw an opportunity, a chance to reshape the Middle East, to establish American dominance in a region that would define the next century. That's not a secret, Kate said. Desert Storm was public knowledge. The war was public. Whitmore's voice hardened. Echo Protocol wasn't. Echo Protocol was what we did in the months before the war. What we did to make sure we had justification for what came next. He pulled a folder from beneath a stack of supplies, set it on the table between them. The classification markings made Kate's breath catch. She had seen top secret documents before, but this was something else. This was the kind of file that destroyed careers just for knowing it existed. In 1989, Whitmore continued, we identified 6 Iraqi scientists who were working on chemical weapons programs. Smart men, educated in the West, secretly opposed to Saddam's regime. We recruited them, promised them asylum, promised them safety if they helped us understand Iraq's weapons capabilities. That's standard intelligence work, Kate said, though she felt the ice forming in her stomach. It was, until someone in the Pentagon had a different idea. Whitmore opened the folder, pulled out a memo dated November 1990. This is a classified directive from a joint CIA-Pentagon working group. It authorized the sale of chemical weapons precursors to Iraq through third-party companies. $50 million worth, ostensibly to help Iraq develop defensive capabilities against Iranian attacks. Kate stared at the document, trying to make sense of what she was reading. We sold them chemical weapons components. We sold them the rope to hang themselves with. Whitmore's laugh was bitter. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. We would provide the materials through our own recruited scientists. They would believe they were helping their country defend itself. Then when the materials were discovered after we invaded, we would have proof of WMD programs. Proof that justified regime change. But those scientists, Kate said slowly, understanding now, they could connect the materials back to us. They could prove we had sold them. Exactly. Whitmore sat back down heavily, which meant they became a liability the moment the first American tank crossed the border into Iraq. The room felt too small suddenly. Kate could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Garrett's tension behind her, could see the weight of history pressing down on this moment. Someone gave an order, she said, to eliminate them. The order came from a committee, anonymous, distributed through proper channels, 6 targets, all to be eliminated and deaths blamed on Iraqi regime. A Delta Force team was selected for the mission because they were the best, because they could be trusted to follow orders without question. Kate felt her hands clenching into fists. Her father's team. Captain Raymond Bishop was the commanding officer. Whitmore pulled out another document, a mission brief dated February 25th, 1991. 12 operators. Your father was attached from Force Recon because he had worked with Iraqi dissidents before. He knew the language, knew the culture. He was supposed to make the operation go smoothly. But he didn't, Kate said. Number Whitmore smiled sadly. Jack Callahan took one look at those 6 men hiding in a safe house in Baghdad, knowing they had risked everything because we promised them safety, and he refused to pull the trigger. Sergeant Major Garrett spoke for the first time, his voice rough. I was there. I was 21 years old and I'd never questioned an order in my life. But when Jack said no, when he said these men were under American protection and killing them was murder, something changed for all of us. What did Bishop do? Kate asked, though she already knew the answer would break something inside her. He tried to reason with Jack. Garrett's eyes were distant, seeing something from decades ago. Told him we had orders from the highest levels, that if we didn't do it, someone else would, and we'd all be court-martialed, that his career, his family, everything he'd worked for would be destroyed. And my father still refused. Your father looked Bishop in the eye and said there are some orders that should be refused, that if following orders meant murdering innocents, then the orders were wrong and the people who gave them were criminals. Garrett's voice broke. He said he'd rather face a firing squad than live with that blood on his hands. Kate felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. What happened next? Bishop made a choice, Whitmore said. He decided to fake the executions. They would report the targets eliminated but actually smuggle the scientists out through Kurdish smuggling routes. Hide them until they could be properly extracted. It was a compromise, a way to save the scientists and save their careers. But it didn't work, Kate said. One of the scientists panicked. Dr. Rashid Al-Takriti. Garrett's hands clenched. He ran during the exfiltration. Thought we were going to kill them after all. In the confusion, shots were fired. Rashid was hit. He died in Jack's arms. The Iraqi authorities found the body, Whitmore continued, began investigating. The whole operation was compromised. We had to actually eliminate the other 5 scientists through other channels to cover up what had happened. They died believing we had betrayed them. And in a way, we had. Kate stood abruptly, walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Outside, her team moved through their defensive positions. Young soldiers who believed they were serving their country, who trusted that the orders they followed came from honorable people, just like her father had once believed. Bishop reported the mission as successful, she asked. He had no choice. Whitmore's voice carried old pain. The committee wanted confirmation. Bishop provided it. But he also documented everything, every order, every name, every detail. He kept it as insurance. And he told me about it because I was the one person who might be able to protect him if it ever came out. You were part of the committee, Kate said, turning to face him. I was. Whitmore met her eyes without flinching. I voted to authorize Echo Protocol. I voted to eliminate those scientists. I am as guilty as anyone. More perhaps because I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. Why, Kate demanded. Why would you do something you knew was evil? Because I told myself it was for the greater good. That 6 lives were acceptable losses compared to the thousands we might save by maintaining American influence in the Middle East. Because I was ambitious and the people giving orders controlled my career. Because I was a coward who chose comfort over conscience. The raw honesty in his voice silenced the room. Kate looked at this old man, this former CIA director, this witness to 30 years of lies, and saw not a monster but something worse. A normal man who had done monstrous things for bureaucratic reasons. What about Mogadishu? Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What about my father? Whitmore pulled out another file. This one had even higher classification markings. Inside was an after-action report from Operation Gothic Serpent, the mission that became known as Black Hawk Down. The official story is that your father was killed by enemy fire during the battle. Whitmore turned to a specific page, highlighted in yellow. But the classified addendum tells a different story. He was shot by an American weapon, M4 rifle, from behind, from approximately 50 meters. The ballistic analysis confirmed it. Friendly fire in combat, Garrett said hollowly. That's what they told us. That in the chaos, someone on our side fired in the wrong direction. Except the shot was too precise, Whitmore said. Too clean. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who had him in their sights and made a choice. Kate felt the world tilting around her. Bishop, she said. The order came through encrypted channels during the battle. Whitmore showed her a communication log, times and codes that meant nothing to most people but everything to someone who understood military protocols. Callahan is compromised. He's planning to expose Echo Protocol to press. Eliminate with extreme prejudice. Bishop received that order? Kate's voice shook. He did. And approximately 10 minutes later, your father was dead. Why? Kate slammed her hand on the table. Why would he do it? He and my father faked the executions together. They were on the same side. Because the committee told Bishop they had evidence of his actions in Baghdad. That they would prosecute him for disobeying orders, for fraud, for compromising national security. And they threatened his family. Whitmore pulled out a photograph of a young woman and 2 small girls, Bishop's wife and daughters. The message was clear. Follow orders or watch your family destroyed. So he chose his family over my father, Kate said bitterly. He chose survival over honor. Whitmore's voice was gentle, just like I did, just like most people do when pushed hard enough. Your father was different. He was willing to sacrifice everything for what was right. That's what made him a hero, and that's why he had to die. Kate turned away, unable to look at the photographs anymore, unable to breathe in the same room with the truth she had been seeking for 20 years. She walked outside into the cold mountain air, past her team, past the defensive positions, to the edge of the compound where the valley opened up into endless sky. Garrett followed her after a moment, stood beside her in silence, both of them looking at mountains that didn't care about human pain. Did you know, Kate asked finally, about Bishop? I suspected. Garrett's voice was raw. I saw your father go down, saw the blood. I was 20 meters away, and there were bullets everywhere, and I couldn't get to him. But later, when I thought about the angles, about the timing, about how Bishop was positioned, it added up in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. Why didn't you tell me? Because I had no proof. Because calling out a fellow soldier for murder without evidence would have destroyed both of us. Because I was a coward like everyone else. Garrett turned to face her. I'm sorry, Katie. I'm sorry I wasn't brave like your father. Sorry I chose silence over truth. Kate wanted to rage at him, to scream about betrayal and lies and 20 years of wondering. But looking at his face, At the tears cutting through the dust and the weight of 3 decades of guilt, she understood that everyone in this story had been broken by it. Her father hadn't been the only casualty. He was just the only one who died physically. The sound of rotor blades in the distance made both of them turn. Kate pulled out her binoculars, scanned the horizon. 2 helicopters inbound. Blackhawks. American markings. Captain Cross's voice crackled over her radio. "Major, we have inbound aircraft. 2 birds. Heavily armed. ETA 3 minutes." Kate ran back to the compound, her mind racing through tactical options. Inside, Whitmore and McKenna were gathering documents, preparing for whatever came next. "That's Sheridan's response," McKenna said grimly. "He knows you made contact, knows you're getting the truth. He can't let any of us leave here alive." Kate pulled out her satellite phone, typed a message to Lieutenant Sarah Chen back at the Tactical Operations Center. "Need immediate sitrep on inbound aircraft. Authorization and mission parameters." The response came back in seconds, and Kate's blood ran cold. "Major, General Sheridan has issued a kill order. All personnel at your location designated as enemy combatants. Rules of engagement are weapons-free." Captain Cross appeared beside her. "They're going to level this place. We need to move now." "Move where?" Kate gestured at the valley around them. "We're surrounded by mountains. Those Blackhawks will hunt us down in minutes." "Then we fight," Cross said. His skepticism about her leadership had vanished somewhere between the halo jump and the revelation that their own command wanted them dead. "We dig in and we make them pay for every inch." Kate looked at her team. 12 soldiers against helicopter gunships and whatever ground forces Sheridan was sending. The math didn't work, but surrender wasn't an option either. Not when the truth was finally within reach. Whitmore approached, holding the folder with all the Echo Protocol documentation. "Major Callahan, these files need to get out. Someone has to know what happened. If we all die here, Sheridan wins and your father's sacrifice meant nothing." "How do we get them out?" Kate demanded. "We're cut off from friendly forces. Command wants us dead. Even if we had extraction, where would we go?" Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through Kate's earpiece. Private channel. "Major, I've been monitoring Sheridan's communications. He's operating outside normal chains of command. This kill order was never authorized by JSOC or the Pentagon. He's gone rogue." "That gives us 48 hours, Kate said, understanding immediately. "Maybe less before real oversight catches what he's doing." Chen hesitated. "Major, there's something else. Colonel Bishop requested to lead the ground team hunting you." Kate felt her chest constrict. "Bishop is coming here?" "He insisted. Told Sheridan he knew you best, knew how you think. He's inbound with 30 Delta operators. ETA 90 minutes. Garrett overheard on his own radio. Ray's coming. Why would he do that after confessing everything to you?" "Because he wants to finish what he started," Kate said quietly. "Either by killing me or by helping me. We won't know which until he gets here." The Blackhawks were visible now, dark shapes against the morning sky, closing fast. Kate made her decision. "Everyone inside, defensive positions. McKenna, you and your team know this compound better than we do. Where are the strongest positions?" McKenna pointed to a reinforced building on the north side. "Old Soviet munitions storage. Walls are 3 feet thick. They can strafe it all day and won't get through. Get the civilians there. Cross, take 4 men and establish firing positions on the roof. Garrett, you're with me. We're going to make it expensive for them to get close." The Blackhawks opened fire before she finished speaking. Rockets screamed into the compound, detonating in flowers of fire and debris. Kate hit the ground, rolled behind a wall, as bullets stitched the earth where she had been standing. Around her, her team moved with trained precision, returning fire even as they fell back toward better cover. One of McKenna's men went down, took a round through the leg. Kate and Garrett dragged him toward the munitions storage while Cross's team laid down suppressive fire. The Blackhawks circled like vultures, their door gunners raking the compound with sustained bursts. "This is a slaughter," Cross shouted over the noise. "We can't hold against this kind of firepower." "We don't need to hold forever," Kate shouted back. "Just long enough." "For what?" "For Bishop to get here, for the truth to get out, for something other than all of us dying in this godforsaken valley." A rocket hit the building next to them, showering them with concrete fragments. Kate felt something hot slice across her shoulder, but ignored it, focused on getting her people to safety. The civilians were huddled in the munitions storage, terrified but alive. Whitmore sat among them, still clutching his folder, protecting it with his body. "How long can we last like this?" one of the younger operators asked, his voice tight with fear. Long enough, Kate said, though she had no idea if it was true. She checked her watch. Bishop would be here in 75 minutes. The Blackhawks had enough fuel for maybe another hour of sustained operations. If they could survive that long, if Bishop's arrival changed the equation somehow, they might have a chance. If not, they would die here, all of them, and the truth would die with them. The helicopters pulled back suddenly, gaining altitude. Kate watched through her rifle scope, trying to understand the tactical shift. Then she saw it. Ground vehicles approaching from the east. 4 Humvees, moving fast, kicking up dust trails. Reinforcements, Garrett said grimly. Sheridan's throwing everything at us. Kate counted operators as they dismounted from the vehicles. 30 men, full Delta Squadron. They moved with the lethal efficiency of America's most elite soldiers, establishing positions, coordinating with the Blackhawks, preparing for an assault that would overwhelm the compound through sheer professional excellence. She recognized some of the faces through her scope. Men she had trained with, men she had served beside in Iraq and Afghanistan, good soldiers following orders they believed were legitimate. Her radio crackled. Major Callahan, this is Captain Tyler Grant. Task Force Black. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Come out with your hands visible and you will not be harmed. Kate knew Tyler Grant. They had gone through Ranger School together. He was a good man, honorable, the kind of officer who believed in the system. She keyed her radio. Tyler, this is Kate. You're being used. Sheridan is protecting war criminals. The people in this compound are witnesses, not enemies. Major, I have orders directly from the National Security Advisor. You are harboring enemy combatants and classified material. Surrender or we will take the compound by force. Tyler, please listen to me. Check the authorization on those orders. Check who signed them. Sheridan is operating outside proper channels. There was a long pause, then Grant's voice came back harder. Major, you have 5 minutes to comply. After that, we come in. The radio went dead. Kate looked at her team, saw fear in the younger faces, saw resignation in the older ones, saw determination in all of them. We're not surrendering, she said. Not to people who want us dead for telling the truth. We hold this position until Bishop arrives. Then we pray he's on our side. And if he's not, Cross asked, then we die with our eyes open. Better than dying on our knees. The assault began exactly 5 minutes later. Task Force Black moved like a machine, covering and advancing with textbook precision. Kate's team returned fire, making them pay for every meter. But the outcome was inevitable. They were outnumbered 3-1 by operators just as skilled, just as determined. Garrett took a round to his body armor that cracked ribs but didn't penetrate. He kept fighting. Cross caught shrapnel from a grenade that peppered his leg with metal fragments. He kept fighting. Kate felt blood running down her arm from the shoulder wound, but she kept fighting too, because that's what soldiers did. They fought until they couldn't anymore. The Blackhawks made another pass, and this time their rockets found the building where Cross's team was positioned. The roof collapsed in a thunderous crash. Kate screamed into her radio, demanding status. 2 voices answered. 2 out of 5. 3 men dead in an instant. We can't hold, Garrett said. His face was gray with pain. Katie, we need to fall back to the munitions storage. Make our last stand there. Not yet, Kate said. Though she knew he was right, she was buying minutes now. Minutes for something to change, for some miracle to happen. For her father's ghost to reach down and save them the way they hadn't saved him. The radio crackled with a new voice. All units, this is Colonel Bishop. Cease fire immediately. I say again, cease fire. The shooting stopped. Kate raised her head cautiously from behind her cover. Saw Task Force Black holding position, weapons still aimed but fingers off triggers. Saw the Blackhawks hovering but not firing. And then she saw him. Colonel Raymond Bishop walking into the compound alone, unarmed except for a sidearm on his hip, his hands visible. Behind him, the 30 operators of Task Force Black watched with weapons ready but not raised. He walked directly to where Kate was positioned, stepped over debris and blood, and stopped 3 meters away. Their eyes met. Hello, Katie, he said quietly. She aimed her rifle at his chest, finger on the trigger. Center mass shot. 20 years of training and anger and grief focused on this one moment. Did you kill my father? She asked. Bishop didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Yes. Sergeant Major Garrett lunged at him, but Kate stopped him with a raised hand. Her rifle never wavered. Why? Her voice broke on the word. Because they told me if I didn't, They would kill my wife and daughters. Because I was weak. Because I chose my family over honor. Bishop's eyes were wet. Because I have been a coward for 33 years, and your father's blood has stained every day since. Kate's finger tightened on the trigger. 1 pound of pressure. That's all it would take. Justice for her father. Revenge for 20 years of lies. I came here to give you a choice I didn't take, Bishop said. He pulled a data drive from his pocket, held it out. Everything, every name, every order, every crime, Sheridan, the committee, all of it. You can expose them. Or I take the fall. I confess to Echo Protocol. Say I acted alone. Rogue officer who murdered those scientists and killed Jack Callahan to cover it up. Everyone else goes free. You live. Whitmore lives. The truth stays buried, but you survive. That's not justice, Kate said. No, it's pragmatism. It's survival. It's the same choice I made 33 years ago when I pulled the trigger. Bishop's voice hardened. But this time, you get to decide. Kill me and expose everyone and probably die doing it. Or let me finally do one honorable thing and walk away. Kate looked at him, saw the man who had mentored her through Delta selection, who had pushed her to be better, who had attended her husband's funeral and stood beside her at the grave, who had murdered her father in cold blood. There's a third option? Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through Kate's earpiece. If you can hold out for 44 more hours, Sheridan's authority collapses. Real oversight kicks in. You win without having to die for it. Kate lowered her rifle slightly. You heard that? I did. Bishop smiled sadly. Sarah's been feeding me intelligence for the past hour. That's how I knew to come. That's how I knew what Sheridan was really doing. You're helping us? Garrett demanded. I'm trying to finally do what Jack would have done. Bishop looked past Kate toward the munitions storage where Whitmore waited. I can't command these men to stand down. Sheridan has their loyalty, but I can give you time. How? This compound has an old munitions bunker under the north building, still armed with Soviet-era explosives. I can collapse it, bottle up Task Force Black for 6, maybe 8 hours while they dig out. That's suicide, Kate said. Bishop met her eyes. That's redemption, or as close as I'll ever get. Before Katie could respond, the sound of rotors changed pitch. She looked up to see the Blackhawks pulling back, gaining altitude rapidly. Her radio erupted with urgent transmissions. All units, this is Task Force Black, actual. We have priority override from JSOC. Stand down immediately. Federal authorities inbound. Mission abort. Grant's voice cut through. Colonel Bishop, confirm that order. Bishop pulled out his own radio. Confirmed. Stand down and prepare for federal custody. He looked at Kate. Senator Patricia Holbrook. She got Whitmore's preliminary testimony through Chen's back channel. She moved faster than even I expected. It's over? Cross asked, limping up with his shredded leg still bleeding. The shooting's over, Bishop said. The hard part's just beginning. 3 weeks later, Kate Callahan stood in Colonel Bishop's office at Fort Bragg. The room had been stripped of personal effects. No photographs, no commendations, no evidence that a man had spent 40 years of his life in service here. Bishop sat at his empty desk, civilian clothes already packed, retirement papers signed under duress. The deal had been simple. He would resign quietly, testify to a classified Senate committee, take responsibility for Echo Protocol while implicating the broader conspiracy. In exchange, his family would be protected and he would avoid public trial. Sheridan had been placed under house arrest pending investigation. 6 other committee members were being questioned. The truth was coming out slowly, carefully, through proper channels that would take years to fully expose. Whitmore had been placed in witness protection. His testimony would be sealed for 75 years under national security protocols. The public would never know what really happened, but the machinery of justice, slow and imperfect as it was, had finally started turning. I wanted to thank you, Kate said, for giving us the time. I didn't do it for thanks. Bishop looked old and tired and ready for whatever came next. I did it because Jack Callahan deserved better than he got, because his daughter deserved the truth, because I've run from my sins for long enough. What will you do now? Disappear. Live quiet. Try to figure out if there's any redemption possible for a man who murdered his friend. Bishop stood, offered his hand. Your father was the best man I ever knew. I destroyed him, but I couldn't destroy what he believed in. You carry that forward, Katie. You be the soldier he wanted you to be. Kate took his hand, felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. "I forgive you," she heard herself say. "Not because you earned it, but because carrying hate is too heavy." Bishop's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, that's more than I deserve." He walked out of the office. Kate watched him go, watched a broken man shuffle toward whatever remained of his life. She thought about justice and mercy and the space between them, thought about her father who had died for principles, about Bishop who had lived without them, about herself standing in the middle, trying to honor both. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lieutenant Chen. "Major, General Morrison wants to see you. She's offering you a promotion, ethics oversight position at the Pentagon." Kate deleted the message. She had already made her decision. The Army War College had offered her a teaching position, training the next generation of officers, teaching them about difficult choices and moral courage and the price of blind obedience. Her father had died trying to change the system from inside. Bishop had lived trying to protect it. Kate would do something different. She would teach young soldiers to question, to think, to understand that sometimes the hardest thing a soldier could do was refuse an order. She walked out of Bishop's office and didn't look back. 6 months later, on a cold morning at Arlington National Cemetery, Kate stood before 3 graves. Her father's, simple and white, her husband's beside it. And now, newest of all, Colonel Raymond Bishop's. He had died 3 weeks earlier. Heart attack in his sleep, or so the official report said. Kate suspected he had simply stopped fighting to live, that the weight of his sins had finally crushed him. She placed flowers on all 3 graves, spoke to the dead men who had shaped her life. "Dad, I'm teaching now, telling your story to young officers who need to understand what real courage looks like. Not the kind that charges machine guns, the kind that says no when everyone else says yes. You'd be proud, I think. Marcus, I miss you every day, but I'm still standing, still fighting, still trying to make the world you died protecting a little bit better. Ray, I hope you found peace. I hope wherever you are, Dad found a way to forgive you. Because I have. Not for what you did, but for trying at the end to make it right." She stood there in silence. 3 names on 3 stones. 3 men who had died for different reasons, but whose deaths had taught her the same lesson. That honor wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about choosing again and again to try to do better. As she turned to leave, she saw a young woman in an Army lieutenant's uniform standing nearby. Early 20s, dark hair, nervous energy. The woman approached hesitantly. "Major Callahan, I'm Lieutenant Rachel Bishop, Ray Bishop's daughter." Kate felt her breath catch. "You look like him. I wanted to meet you, to understand what happened. My father, he left me letters explaining everything. About Echo Protocol, about your father, about his choices." Rachel's voice shook. "I joined the Army to understand, to see if I could be better than he was." Kate looked at this young officer, this daughter of the man who killed her father, and saw not an enemy, but a continuation. A chance for the next generation to learn from the sins of the last. "Walk with me," Kate said. "I'll tell you about 2 men. One who chose honor and paid with his life. One who chose survival and paid with his soul. And maybe together we can figure out how to be the soldiers they wanted us to become." They walked away from the graves together, 2 women carrying the weight of their father's legacies, heading toward an uncertain future where the old sins might finally be redeemed by new choices. Behind them, the white stones stood silent witness. Jack Callahan, Marcus Callahan, Raymond Bishop, dead but not forgotten. Their mistakes and their sacrifices woven into the fabric of a story that would outlive them all. And somewhere in the bureaucratic machinery of Washington, sealed files marked Echo Protocol waited for a day 75 years hence when the truth might finally see sunlight. When history could judge with clear eyes what had been done in the name of national security. But Kate Callahan wasn't waiting 75 years. She was teaching that truth now, to every young officer who sat in her classroom, to every soldier who needed to understand that following orders wasn't enough, that conscience mattered, that sometimes the most courageous thing a warrior could do was refuse to fight. Her father had taught her that, by dying for it. Bishop had taught her that, by living without it. Now she would teach others. And maybe, just maybe, the next generation would be better than the ones that came before. That was the long war, the one that mattered, the war for the soul of what it meant to serve. And Major Katherine Callahan intended to win it. The Army War College at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania, sat like a monument to military tradition in the rolling hills of Cumberland County. Its red brick buildings had witnessed generations of officers learning the art of war, studying the campaigns of Grant and Patton and Schwarzkopf, preparing to lead America's sons and daughters into battle. Major Katherine Callahan walked its hallowed grounds 6 months after the events in Afghanistan, carrying secrets that would destroy everything these walls represented if they ever saw daylight. The classroom smelled of old books and floor polish. 40 young officers sat in neat rows, captains and majors mostly, the ones marked for higher command, the future generals and strategists who would shape American military policy for the next 3 decades. They looked at Kate with a mixture of respect and curiosity. A Delta Force operator teaching military ethics was unusual enough. A female Delta operator was practically unheard of. She stood at the front of the room, behind a podium she never used, preferring to pace as she spoke. On the screen behind her was a photograph of her father in full dress uniform, young and proud and alive. "This is my father," she began. "Sergeant First Class Jack Callahan, United States Marine Corps. He died in Mogadishu, Somalia, in October 1993 during the Battle of the Black Sea. The official record says he was killed by enemy fire while attempting to rescue downed helicopter crew members. For 20 years, I believed that story. I was proud of that story." She clicked to the next slide, a classified document so heavily redacted that only fragments of sentences remain visible. "The truth is more complicated. My father died because he refused an illegal order, because he chose conscience over career, because he understood that blind obedience can lead good soldiers to commit atrocities." The room had gone completely silent. Kate could see the discomfort on some faces, the recognition that she was about to cross lines that weren't meant to be crossed in military education. "I'm teaching this course because the Army needs officers who understand that following orders isn't always enough, that sometimes the most courageous act a soldier can perform is to say no." She met the eyes of a young captain in the front row. "Your oath is to the Constitution, not to the chain of command. When those two things conflict, you need to know which one matters more." A hand went up. Captain James Morrison, according to his nameplate. West Point graduate, Ranger qualified. The kind of squared-away officer who would make general if he played his cards right. "Ma'am, with respect," Morrison said carefully, "isn't our job to follow orders? Isn't the whole military structure built on that principle?" "Our job is to defend the Constitution," Kate replied. "Sometimes that means following orders. Sometimes it means questioning them. And very rarely it means refusing them altogether. Knowing which is which separates good officers from dangerous ones. But who decides?" Another officer, older, already showing the weight of multiple combat tours. "If every soldier gets to pick and choose which orders to follow, we have chaos." "You're right, which is why refusal requires certainty. Moral certainty that what you're being asked to do violates fundamental principles." Kate's voice hardened. "My father had that certainty. He knew the order he received was illegal and immoral. His refusal cost him his life, but his conscience remained intact." "And if you're wrong," Morrison pressed, "if you refuse an order and it turns out you misunderstood the situation, then you accept the consequences. Court-martial, prison, discharge." Kate paused, let that sink in. "But at least you accept those consequences as yourself, not as someone who abandoned their principles to avoid punishment." The class ended in uncomfortable silence. As the officers filed out, Kate saw them processing what she had said, weighing it against everything they had been taught at West Point or the Citadel or Officer Candidate School. Most would forget it eventually. The system would smooth away the rough edges of doubt, but maybe one or two would remember, would carry her father's example into the hard decisions they would face. That was enough. It had to be enough. Lieutenant Rachel Bishop waited outside the classroom. 6 months ago, she had been a stranger. Now she was something like a friend, though the foundation of that friendship was built on the most painful truth imaginable. The daughter of the man who killed Kate's father. Two women bound together by the sins of their fathers, trying to forge something better from the wreckage. "How'd it go?" Rachel asked. "Same as always." Katie gathered her notes. "Half of them think I'm inspiring. The other half think I'm dangerously subversive. Which half is right?" Kate smiled without humor. "Both, probably. Walk with me. I need coffee and distance from that classroom in equal measure." They walked across the grounds toward the officers' club, Two women in uniform, moving through a world built by and for men. Rachel had her father's eyes, Kate noticed. That same haunted quality that came from knowing too much, caring too much, being unable to forget. I got a letter yesterday, Rachel said quietly, from someone who knew my father. Someone who worked Echo Protocol. Kate stopped walking. Who? He didn't sign it. But he knew details that weren't in Dad's letters to me. Knew about the scientists in Baghdad. Knew about the orders. Knew about things that were never officially documented. Rachel pulled the letter from her jacket, handed it to Kate. He says there are more files, more evidence, hidden in places even the Senate investigation didn't find. What does he want? To clear his conscience before he dies, I think. Rachel's voice was tight. He says the committee was bigger than anyone knows. That Sheridan was just middle management. That the real architects are still out there, still in power, still running operations. Kate read the letter, typed, unsigned, postmarked from Washington, D.C. The details were specific enough to be credible. Locations of safe deposit boxes in 3 different cities. Names of shell companies that moved money. Dates of transactions that corresponded with known military operations. The kind of information that could blow the lid off the carefully managed narrative that had emerged from the Senate hearings. This is dangerous, Kate said. If someone's willing to come forward after all these years, it means they're either dying or desperate. Either way, it makes them vulnerable. Makes us vulnerable if we pursue it. But we have to, right? Rachel's voice carried an edge that reminded Kate of Bishop in his final days. Dad died believing he could make it count for something. That his sacrifice, his confession, meant the truth would finally come out. If there's more to expose, don't we owe it to him? We owe him peace, Kate handed the letter back. Going after this, it just keeps the wound open. The Senate knows the truth. Sheridan's under house arrest. The machinery of justice is moving, slowly but moving. Maybe that's sufficient. Is it sufficient for you? Kate thought about her classroom full of young officers. About teaching the lessons her father died to prove. About living in a world where the full truth stayed buried under national security classifications for 75 years. No, she admitted. But I'm tired, Rachel. Tired of fighting ghosts. Tired of watching good people destroy themselves trying to fix what's fundamentally broken in the system. Then let me do it. Rachel's jaw set with determination. Let me follow these leads. You taught me that some principles matter more than safety. Let me prove I learned the lesson. Before Kate could respond, her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Just coordinates and a time. 2200 hours tonight. She showed it to Rachel. That's Rock Creek Park, Rachel said. The old Civil War fort ruins. Why would someone want to meet you there? Only one way to find out. Kate pocketed her phone. But I'm going alone. If this is a trap, no point in both of us walking into it. The ruins of Fort Stevens sat abandoned in the darkness of Rock Creek Park, a Civil War relic slowly being reclaimed by nature. Kate approached on foot, her sidearm concealed under her jacket, every sense alert for ambush. The park was empty this time of night, the city lights of Washington, D.C. a distant glow through the trees. A figure waited in the shadows of the old earthworks, tall, thin, moving with the careful deliberation of someone in pain or very old or both. As Kate got closer, she recognized him from news footage and military databases and the margins of official histories. Senator Harold Vance, 82 years old, former Army colonel, former chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and according to Whitmore's testimony, one of the original architects of Echo Protocol. Major Callahan, Vance said. His voice carried the gravel of age and a lifetime of cigarettes. Thank you for coming. I wasn't certain you would. Senator? Kate stopped 10 feet away, maintaining tactical distance. Why am I here? Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. 3 months if I'm lucky, maybe less if I'm not. And I find that dying men have very little reason to keep lying. Vance moved into a shaft of moonlight, and Kate saw how the disease had hollowed him out. The senator's expensive suit hung loose on a frame that had once commanded rooms and intimidated subordinates. Death had already begun its work, patient and thorough. You were part of Echo Protocol. I was more than part of it. I designed it, conceived the entire operation. Vance's laugh was bitter, ending in a cough that shook his whole body. Sold the idea to CIA, Pentagon, White House, convinced everyone that sacrificing 6 scientists was acceptable collateral damage for American strategic interests in the Middle East. I have more blood on my hands than I can count, Major. Your father's included. Then why reach out now, Kate demanded. Guilty conscience looking for absolution before you face whatever comes next? Nothing so noble. Vance sat down heavily on a broken stone wall, the effort clearly costing him. I'm reaching out because there's another Echo protocol happening right now. Different name, different target, same fundamental principle. People are going to die to protect a lie and advance an agenda, and I'm too close to my own death to let it happen without trying to prevent it. What are you talking about? Vance pulled out a folder, handed it to Kate. Inside were documents marked with classifications she had never seen before, security levels that existed in rumors and conspiracy theories. Operation Nightfall, authorization dates from 6 months ago, budget allocations running into billions, organizational charts that connected defense contractors, intelligence agencies, and policymakers in a web of mutual benefit and shared culpability. After Echo Protocol was exposed, after Sheridan went down and the Senate held its hearings and everyone pretended to be shocked, Vance explained, the committee didn't disband. They just got more careful, buried themselves deeper in the bureaucracy. Operation Nightfall is the new version. Chemical weapons again, but this time in Venezuela. Selling precursors to opposition groups, planning to blame the Venezuelan government when the materials are discovered, justifying American intervention and everything that follows. Kate flipped through the documents, her hands shaking despite her efforts to stay calm. This can't be real. The Senate investigation, the reforms, the oversight mechanisms, they were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of operation. The Senate investigation was theater. Vance's voice was heavy with disgust and something that might have been shame. We gave them Sheridan and a few mid-level bureaucrats, fed the press just enough truth to look like we were cleaning house. But the real power structure stayed intact. The same people making the same calculations about acceptable losses and strategic advantages. Who? Kate demanded. Give me names. Vance listed them, and Kate recognized every name. 4 members of the current National Security Council, 2 CIA section chiefs who had survived multiple administrations, 3 defense contractors whose CEOs appeared on Sunday morning news shows and spoke earnestly about American values, an inspector general who was supposed to provide oversight but had become complicit through either cowardice or corruption. Inspector General Margaret Thornton, Vance said, watching Kate's face. She knows about Nightfall, has known for months, but they have leverage on her. A daughter with a complicated past, financial records that could destroy her career, the usual tools of control. Why tell me this? Kate asked. Why not go to the press yourself? Because I'm a dead man already, and they know it. Any testimony I give gets dismissed as the ravings of a cancer patient trying to make peace with God. Vance met her eyes, and Kate saw something in them that might have been genuine regret. But you're a decorated officer, a hero of the Afghan operation, someone who risked everything to expose the truth about her father's death. People believe you. Your credibility is still intact. I'm not my father, Kate said quietly. I survived by being practical, by choosing my battles carefully, by knowing when to push and when to stay quiet. And look where that got you, teaching ethics to officers who will ignore the lessons the moment it becomes inconvenient. Vance struggled to his feet, the effort clearly painful. You want to honor Jack Callahan? Stop the next Echo Protocol before more innocent people die. Stop it while there's still time to prevent the killing instead of just punishing it afterward. What's the timeline? The Venezuelan opposition is supposed to receive the chemical precursors in 3 weeks. Once they do, the operation becomes active. Any exposure after that triggers an international crisis that could spiral into war. Vance handed her a business card with a phone number written in shaky handwriting. This is someone who can help. Someone inside the NSC who wants out but can't act alone. Talk to them. Decide if you have your father's courage or just his legacy. He walked away into the darkness, moving slowly, a ghost of power and influence reduced to dying flesh, trying to make amends. Kate stood in the ruins of Fort Stevens, a place where Union soldiers had fought and died to preserve a republic, and wondered if that republic was worth saving anymore. Wondered if the gap between American ideals and American actions had grown too wide to bridge. Her phone buzzed. Rachel's number. Kate answered. Someone broke into my apartment, Rachel said, voice tight with controlled fear. Tossed the whole place. Professional job. No forced entry, no mess except where they searched. They took my father's letters. All of them. The ones about Echo Protocol, the ones where he confessed everything. Are you safe? I'm at a friend's place, but Kate, whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were looking for. They left my laptop, my phone, everything else. Just took the letters. Get somewhere public. Stay there. Kate was already moving back toward her car. I'm coming to you. The drive from Deese to Carlisle normally took 2 hours. Kate made it in 90 minutes, her mind racing faster than her car. Someone knew about the letter Rachel had received. Someone knew they were digging into Echo Protocol's legacy, which meant someone was watching them. Had been watching them perhaps since the Senate hearings, waiting to see if they would stay quiet or keep pushing. She found Rachel at a 24-hour diner off Interstate 81, sitting in a back booth with coffee she wasn't drinking and a tension in her shoulders that spoke of barely controlled panic. The young woman looked shaken but composed. Bishop's daughter, Kate thought. Whatever his sins, he had raised someone with steel in her spine. They sat across from each other in the harsh fluorescent light. Around them, truckers and insomniacs occupied other booths, each lost in their own small dramas, unaware that 2 women at table 7 were discussing conspiracy and murder and the price of resistance. Tell me everything, Kate said. I came home from the grocery store around 1800. Door was locked, deadbolt engaged, no signs of forced entry. But the second I walked in, I knew someone had been there. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. You know that feeling? When your combat instincts scream that something's wrong even before your conscious mind registers the details? Kate nodded. Your brain picks up 1,000 small things. Angles of furniture slightly off, air circulation disturbed, the smell of someone else's presence. Everything in my desk had been moved. Files gone through carefully, then replaced almost exactly as they were. But not quite. Rachel's voice steadied as she focused on the details, falling back on training to manage fear. My father's letters were in a locked box. They opened it without damaging the lock, took the letters and nothing else. Left cash, left jewelry, left documents that would be valuable to any normal burglar. This wasn't a burglary, Kate said. This was a message. They're telling us they know what we're doing, that they can reach us anywhere. Do we back off? Kate pulled out her phone, dialed the number Vance had given her. It rang 4 times before a woman answered, her voice cautious. Yes, my name is Katherine Callahan. Senator Vance gave me this number. There was a long pause. I was wondering if you'd call. I've been watching the news about your classes at the War College. About your father. The voice was middle-aged, educated, carrying the careful diction of someone who had spent years in government service navigating bureaucratic minefields. We should meet somewhere public, somewhere you feel safe. I don't feel safe anywhere right now. Smart woman. The voice had a hint of dark humor. Union Station, tomorrow at noon. Main hall. Come alone or don't come at all. And Major, watch for surveillance. They're better at it than you might expect. The line went dead. Kate looked at Rachel. You're not going alone, Rachel said. Yes, I am. Kate's voice was firm. If this is a trap, I need you outside it. You're my insurance policy, my dead man's switch. If I don't come out, you go to the press with everything. I barely know anything. Then you'd better start learning fast. Kate pulled out the folder Vance had given her, slid it across the table. Operation Nightfall. Read it, memorize it, hide it somewhere no one will find it, somewhere they won't expect. Rachel opened the folder, started reading. Her face went pale. This is insane. They're planning to do it again. After everything that happened, after all the exposure and the trials and the reforms, they're just doing it again with a new name. That's how power works. It doesn't change. It doesn't learn. It just waits for attention to shift elsewhere and then resumes its previous patterns. Kate finished her coffee, bitter and cold. The question is whether we have the courage to stop it. What would your father do? Kate thought about Jack Callahan standing in that Baghdad safe house, refusing to murder innocent scientists even when threatened with court-martial and professional destruction. About the choice that had cost him everything. He'd stand up, no matter the cost. She met Rachel's eyes. But I'm not sure I'm that brave. I've spent my career being smart instead of courageous. Picking battles I could win, surviving when others didn't. Maybe it's time to be both, Rachel said. Smart and brave. Strategic courage instead of suicidal heroism. Kate smiled despite herself. You sound like your father. He used to say that too, before he made the one choice that was brave but not smart at all. Union Station at noon was controlled chaos. Thousands of people moving through the Grand Hall, heading to trains or meetings or lunch dates, all of them oblivious to the conspiracy unfolding in their midst. Kate stood near the center of the space, watching faces, looking for threats, trying to identify who she was supposed to meet. A woman approached, late 40s, gray, streaking through dark hair, wearing a business suit that marked her as government without announcing which agency. She carried a leather briefcase and walked with the confidence of someone used to moving through centers of power without attracting attention. Major Callahan, she said quietly. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Graves, NSC staff, Counter-Proliferation Division. Walk with me and don't react to what I'm about to tell you. You're with the National Security Council? Kate felt her hand moving toward her concealed weapon. The people Vance had named were NSC members. Relax, I'm one of the good guys, or trying to be anyway. Graves smiled tightly, though her eyes stayed watchful. And before you ask, yes, I know that's exactly what someone who wasn't one of the good guys would say. That's why we're meeting in public with 1,000 witnesses. They moved through the station, two women having a conversation that looked entirely ordinary. Graves bought coffee from a kiosk, handed one to Kate, kept moving toward the main entrance in a pattern that suggested professional counter-surveillance training. I've worked counter-proliferation for 22 years, Graves said. Spent my career trying to keep the worst weapons out of the worst hands. Thought I was serving my country, protecting American interests. 3 months ago, I stumbled onto Operation Nightfall. At first, I thought it was what it claimed to be, interdiction of Venezuelan chemical weapons development. But it's not, Kate said. It's the opposite. We're providing the precursors through the same network that ran Echo Protocol in 1991. Same shell companies under different names. Same logistics routes with minor variations. Same fundamental business model. Graves's voice carried disgust that sounded genuine. They didn't even bother to get creative. When I raised concerns with my supervisor, I was told to drop it. National security. Above my clearance level, the usual bureaucratic stonewalling that means you've stumbled onto something you weren't supposed to find. So why reach out to me? Because Senator Vance told me about you. Described you as someone who might actually have the courage to act on conscience instead of career preservation. Graves stopped walking, turned to face Kate directly. And because he's dead, Kate felt the world shift. What? When? 2 days ago. Officially heart attack in his sleep. A man in his 80s with terminal cancer. It happens. Graves's voice hardened. Unofficially, the coroner I know says there were markers in his blood work consistent with potassium chloride injection. Untraceable if you're not specifically looking for it. Causes cardiac arrest that mimics natural causes. They killed a sitting senator? Former senator. He retired 5 years ago. No security detail, no staff, no one paying attention. Graves started walking again, heading for the exit. And yes, they killed him. Just like they killed your father. Just like they'll kill anyone who threatens to expose Operation Nightfall before it goes active. Kate felt fury and fear warring in her chest. This is bigger than Echo Protocol, isn't it? Much bigger. Echo was one operation, one group of scientists, one set of lies to justify one war. Nightfall is systematic. They've been running these operations for decades under different names with different targets, creating threats to justify interventions, profiting from the chaos that follows. It's not a conspiracy, it's a business model. Graves pulled a USB drive from her briefcase. This contains financial records, authorization memos, communication logs, everything you need to prove Operation Nightfall exists and who's running it. Kate took the drive, felt its weight in her palm. Such a small thing to carry the potential for so much destruction. What happens when I release this? War. Not with Venezuela, but within our own government. The people implicated are powerful, connected. They have resources, allies, the ability to make problems disappear. Graves' face was grim. They'll come after you with everything. Character assassination first, then criminal charges, then maybe something worse if the legal approaches fail. You need to be prepared for that. I've been fighting my whole career, Kate said. What's one more battle? This isn't a battle. This is choosing to walk into crossfire when you could retreat to safety. Graves started walking again, back toward the safety of the crowd. I'm giving you 48 hours to decide. After that, I destroy the evidence, and we all pretend we never had this conversation. I'll sleep badly for the rest of my life, but I'll sleep. And Operation Nightfall proceeds, and more people die so that men in Washington can justify their next war and their next defense contract and their next campaign contribution. Graves disappeared into the crowd, leaving Kate standing alone with a USB drive full of secrets and a choice that would define whether she became her father's daughter or just another person who knew the truth and chose to look away. Kate drove back to Carlisle in a fog of thought and calculation. She kept checking her mirrors for surveillance, kept her phone off to prevent tracking, kept circling through tactical considerations that all ended in the same place. She had the evidence to stop Operation Nightfall, but releasing it would destroy her career, endanger her life, and potentially accomplish nothing if the powers behind it were as entrenched as both Vance and Graves suggested. Rachel was waiting at Kate's apartment. The young woman had been busy. Documents covered every surface, printouts of news articles about Venezuela and American foreign policy, financial statements from defense contractors showing quarterly earnings and stock prices, maps of chemical weapons facilities in the Middle East and South America. She had built a war room in Kate's living room. "I've been researching," Rachel said. "The companies implicated in Operation Nightfall are the same ones that profited from Iraq and Afghanistan. Billion-dollar contracts for private security, weapons systems, reconstruction, political contributions to key committee members, revolving door between Pentagon positions and private sector executive roles. It's all connected. The same names recycling through the same positions decade after decade." Kate set the USB drive on the table. "This has everything. Financial proof, authorization documents, communication logs, everything we need to blow the whole thing open and watch it explode. Then let's do it." Rachel reached for the drive. Kate grabbed her wrist. "Wait, think about what you're really saying. We release this. We become targets. Not just us, but everyone we care about. Your mother, my students. Anyone connected to us becomes potential leverage or collateral damage. So we just let them get away with it? Let them run another operation, kill more people, start another war, and do nothing? That's not what I said." Kate released Rachel's wrist, started pacing the small apartment. "I'm saying we need to be strategic. We can't just dump this on the internet and hope for the best. We need allies, people with resources and credibility who can't be easily dismissed or eliminated. What do you suggest?" "We need multiple release points. Journalists with credibility, congressional oversight that isn't compromised. Maybe international bodies that can create pressure from outside." Kate was thinking out loud now, building a plan. "Graves gave us the ammunition, but we need to choose our targets carefully and coordinate the attack so they can't suppress it." Rachel considered this. "My father had contacts from his black operations days. Other operators who got out, went private sector, still have connections in intelligence and defense communities. Some of them might help. That puts them at risk too. They're already at risk." Rachel's voice hardened in a way that reminded Kate painfully of Bishop. "Everyone who knows about Echo Protocol is at risk. We either accept that and fight, or we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for them to decide we know too much." Kate stopped pacing, looked at this young officer who 6 months ago had been a stranger and was now something close to family, bound by blood and guilt and shared determination to finish what their fathers had started. "Your father told me once that pulling the trigger on my dad was the hardest thing he ever did, that he lived with that choice every day until it destroyed him." Kate met Rachel's eyes. "I don't want you to have to live with regrets like that. Don't want you choosing between honor and survival and getting it wrong the way he did." "Then help me get it right." Rachel stood, moved to stand directly in front of Kate. "You teach ethics to young officers. You tell them about courage and conscience and the price of principle. Now it's time to prove you believe what you teach." Kate thought about her classroom, about 40 faces learning lessons her father had died to demonstrate, about the luxury of theoretical discussions when the real choice was standing in front of her demanding action. She picked up the USB drive. "All right, we do this, but we do it carefully. We build a case that can't be ignored or suppressed. We protect ourselves as best we can, and we accept that once we start, there's no going back. No safe harbor, no retreat." "No going back," Rachel agreed. They spent the next 8 hours reviewing the contents of the drive. Financial transactions showing millions flowing from defense contractors through shell companies to operational accounts. Emails between NSC staffers discussing chemical precursor specifications and delivery timelines using carefully coded language. Authorization memos signed by officials whose names Kate recognized from news briefings and policy debates. The evidence was comprehensive and damning and terrifying in its implications. Around 3 in the morning, Kate's phone rang, unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered on speaker. Major Callahan, a man's voice said, calm, professional, utterly unthreatening in tone. We know you met with Elizabeth Graves today. We know you have materials that don't belong to you. We'd like to have a conversation about returning those materials and avoiding unnecessary complications. Who is this? Call me Mitchell. I represent certain interests that would prefer Operation Nightfall remain confidential for reasons of national security. We're prepared to offer you a very generous arrangement if you'll return the materials and forget this conversation ever happened. Not interested. Kate kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. I don't think you understand the situation, Major. Mitchell's voice never changed tone, remaining pleasant and reasonable. We're offering you a way out, a quiet retirement with full pension, maybe a position at a well-funded think tank, where you can continue your important work on military ethics without the burden of active service. All you have to do is walk away from this particular fight. And if I don't, then we'll be forced to take less pleasant measures. Your service record will be reviewed with particular attention to mental health evaluations. Questions will be raised about your stability following your father's death and your husband's death. Perhaps criminal charges related to mishandling classified information. Mitchell paused. We have many tools, Major. We'd rather not use them, but we will if necessary to protect national security. Is that a threat? It's a friendly warning from people who would prefer to see you continue your valuable work at the War College rather than end up in federal prison or worse. You have 48 hours to make the sensible choice. After that, things become considerably more complicated for everyone involved. The line went dead. Rachel's face had gone white. They know everything, she whispered. Where you were today, who you talked to, what you have. They've been watching us the whole time. Kate ejected the SIM card from her phone, crushed it under her heel, which means they're monitoring all electronic communications. Probably have been since we started asking questions about Echo Protocol months ago. What do? We go dark. No phones, no email, no digital communications of any kind. Kate started gathering the documents, preparing to move everything to a more secure location. We need to get this information to someone who can protect it and us. Someone they can't threaten or silence easily. Who? Kate thought about her options. Journalists could be intimidated with legal threats and national security arguments. Congressional oversight was already compromised, as Vance had made clear. Law enforcement could be tied up in jurisdictional games and classification issues. She needed someone outside the system, but connected enough to make noise that couldn't be ignored. General Patricia Morrison, she said finally. 3-star general, retired. Runs a veterans advocacy group. She was friends with my father back in the 90s. Testified at Sheridan's hearing. If anyone has the credibility and the courage to take this on without being easily dismissed or threatened, it's her. How do we reach her without them knowing? Old school, no electronics. Kate grabbed her car keys. We drive to her house unannounced. Show up on her doorstep. No digital trail for them to follow. They left within the hour, driving through the pre-dawn darkness toward Morrison's home in rural Virginia. Kate kept her eyes on the mirrors constantly, looking for surveillance. She saw nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't being followed. The people running Operation Nightfall had resources that made traditional counter-surveillance extremely difficult. As dawn broke over the Virginia countryside, Kate thought about her father, about the choice he had made in Baghdad when ordered to kill innocents, about Bishop's choice in Mogadishu when ordered to silence the one man who might expose the truth, about the long chain of choices that had led her to this moment, driving toward an uncertain confrontation with forces that had destroyed better people than her. She thought about her students, about the lessons she taught them, about whether she had the courage to live by those lessons when it truly mattered, when the cost was immediate and personal rather than theoretical and distant. Beside her, Rachel slept fitfully, exhausted from the long night of research and planning and fear. The daughter of a murderer and the daughter of his victim, united by shared determination to finish what their fathers had started and failed to complete. The road stretched ahead into the rising sun. Behind them, Washington, D.C. woke to another day of power and intrigue and carefully managed lies. Ahead, General Morrison waited at her farmhouse, unaware that she was about to be handed a grenade with the pin already pulled. Kate pressed the accelerator, committed now to a path that would end in either redemption or destruction. There was no middle ground anymore. No safe compromise. No way to be partially brave or strategically principled. Just the choice her father had faced 33 years ago in a Baghdad safe house. Stand up for what's right, accept the consequences. Let the chips fall where they may. She intended to make him proud, even if it killed her. General Patricia Morrison's farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel road in the hills of Western Virginia, surrounded by 50 acres of forest and pasture that had belonged to her family for 3 generations. The house itself was modest, white clapboard with a wraparound porch, the kind of place where someone who had spent 35 years in military service could finally breathe without the weight of rank and responsibility pressing down on every moment. Kate Callahan pulled her car to a stop in the circular driveway as the sun climbed over the eastern ridgeline. Beside her, Rachel Bishop stirred from exhausted sleep, blinking at the unfamiliar surroundings. Through the windshield, they could see smoke rising from the farmhouse chimney, the peaceful morning scene at odds with the urgency that had driven them here through the night. Before Kate could unbuckle her seatbelt, the front door opened and General Morrison stepped onto the porch. She was 64 years old, her gray hair cut military short, her posture still parade ground straight despite retirement. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, but the bearing was unmistakable. This was a woman who had commanded battalions, who had made decisions that sent soldiers into harm's way, who had earned 3 stars through competence and courage in an institution that made women fight twice as hard for half the recognition. She also carried a shotgun, held casually but ready. "Major Callahan," Morrison called out, her voice carrying the authority of decades in command. "You want to tell me why you're showing up at my home unannounced at 0600? Kate stepped out of the car, hands visible, movement slow and deliberate. "Ma'am, we need to talk. It's urgent. It's about Echo Protocol." Morrison's expression didn't change, but Kate saw her finger move to rest alongside the shotgun's trigger guard. "That case is closed. Senate investigation concluded. Appropriate actions taken. People in prison or under indictment." "Not all of them," Kate said. "And there's another operation. Same pattern, same people, different target. They're willing to kill to keep it quiet. Senator Vance is already dead." Morrison studied them for a long moment, her professional assessment taking in Kate's exhaustion, Rachel's nervous energy, the desperation that had driven them to her door. Finally, she lowered the shotgun. "Come inside, coffee's on. And this had better be worth interrupting my retirement because I was finally starting to sleep through the night." The farmhouse interior was exactly what Kate expected. Comfortable furniture worn from use rather than abuse. Photographs of Morrison's military career alongside family pictures showing children and grandchildren. Bookshelves packed with military history and strategic theory. A life lived in service to something larger than self, even in retirement, unable to fully separate from what she had been. Morrison poured coffee with steady hands, set steaming mugs in front of them at her kitchen table. Then she sat down and fixed Kate with the same hard stare that had probably terrified countless junior officers over the decades. "Talk," she said. Kate laid it out methodically, the way she had been trained to deliver operational briefings. The meeting with Senator Vance in Rock Creek Park, his revelation of Operation Nightfall and the network of officials running it, Dr. Elizabeth Graves and the evidence on the USB drive, Vance's death 2 days later, disguised as natural causes, the threatening phone call from Mitchell, the break-in at Rachel's apartment, the systematic pattern of surveillance and intimidation designed to silence anyone who asked questions. She spoke without embellishment, letting the facts carry their own weight, knowing that Morrison had seen enough in 3 decades to recognize truth when she heard it. Morrison listened without interruption, her face revealing nothing. When Kate finished, the general reached for the USB drive with a hand that trembled slightly, the only sign of the emotional impact. "May I?" Kate handed it over. Morrison inserted it into a laptop that looked military-grade, probably encrypted and hardened against intrusion. She spent 40 minutes reviewing files, her expression growing darker with each document. Financial transactions, authorization memos, email communications. the architecture of conspiracy laid out in spreadsheets and official letterhead. Finally, she closed the laptop and sat back, her face showing every one of her 64 years. "Son of a bitch," she said quietly. "They really are doing it again. Same playbook, same justifications, same lies. Just a different country and a new generation of people willing to sacrifice principles for profit." "You believe us?" Rachel asked. "I believe the evidence." Morrison's voice carried the weight of old anger, old guilt, old regrets. "I testified at Sheridan's hearing, told Congress we needed systemic reform, not just one scapegoat to appease public outrage. They gave me polite applause and did absolutely nothing. And now this." "Can you help us?" Kate asked directly. Morrison looked at the young lieutenant, and Kate saw something shift in the general's expression. Recognition, maybe, or sympathy for someone so young facing such an ugly truth about institutions they had been taught to trust. "Help you do what, exactly? Expose this and get yourselves killed? These people have resources you can't imagine. They've already killed a sitting senator without anyone noticing or caring. What makes you think they'll hesitate to eliminate 2 officers, one of whom is still on active duty?" "Because we're not alone anymore," Kate said. "You know the truth now. If something happens to us, you can carry it forward. You can be the insurance policy that makes killing us pointless, making me complicit in a target." Morrison's laugh was harsh, without humor. "You're asking me to throw away my retirement, my peace, my remaining years with my grandchildren. That's a hell of an ask, Major. My father made the same ask 33 years ago." Kate met her eyes without blinking. "You were a captain then, serving in the Joint Task Force Logistics Section. He told you about the scientists in Baghdad, about the illegal orders. You promised him if anything happened, you'd make sure the truth came out eventually." Morrison's face went pale. "How do you know about that conversation?" "Colonel Bishop told me before he died." Kate's voice was gentle despite the hardness of what she was saying. "He said my father trusted you above almost anyone else, that you were one of the few officers with the integrity to choose conscience over career when it mattered." "Jack Callahan was the best officer I ever served with," Morrison said quietly, her eyes distant with memory. "When he told me about Baghdad, about the choice he was facing between following orders and committing murder, I promised I would back him up if he refused, support his decision, whatever the consequences. But I was stationed in Germany when Mogadishu happened. By the time I found out he was dead, it was too late to do anything except carry the guilt." "It's not too late now," Rachel said. "You can finish what he started. What my father tried to make right at the end." Morrison stood, walked to the window, stared out at her land. Kate could see the battle playing out in the general's posture, in the tension of her shoulders, in the way her hands clenched and unclenched. The comfort of retirement versus the duty that never really ended. The safety of silence versus the honor of standing up. "If we do this," Morrison said finally, turning to face them, "we do it right. No half measures, no anonymous leaks to the press that can be dismissed as conspiracy theories or Russian disinformation. We build an ironclad case and we deliver it to people who have the authority and the courage to act on it." Who? Kate asked. "The Senate is compromised. Half the intelligence committees have people on the take or under pressure. Who's left that we can trust?" "The Inspector General of the Department of Defense." Morrison's voice was firm now, decision made. "Margaret Thornton. She has statutory authority to investigate corruption and waste. She's independent of the normal chain of command. And despite what Vance told you about leverage, I know for a fact that she's been looking for a way out of her current situation." "How do you know that?" "Because she called me 2 weeks ago, asked to meet off the record, told me she had stumbled onto something that terrified her, but couldn't act on it alone because they had her daughter." Morrison pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts. "Margaret Thornton and I go back 20 years. She's a good woman in an impossible position. If we can give her cover, give her evidence strong enough that she can act without getting her daughter killed, she'll move heaven and earth to stop this." "They'll try to stop us from reaching her," Rachel said. "Of course they will, which is why we don't give them the chance." Morrison started making calls to former colleagues, people she had served with in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the Pentagon, building a network of trust that bypassed official channels. "We move the evidence through channels they won't expect. Multiple copies, multiple carriers. If one route is compromised, the others get through." "How fast can we move?" "We have maybe 12 hours before whoever's watching you figures out where you went and what we're planning. Morrison's voice took on the snap of command she had used for 3 decades. By tomorrow morning, either this evidence is secure with people who can act on it, or we're all in a world of hurt that makes your current problems look trivial. The next 8 hours were controlled chaos. Morrison made calls, each one adding another layer of security, another relay point for the evidence to travel through. Kate and Rachel reviewed the files again, building a summary document that laid out the conspiracy in clear, irrefutable terms. Financial transactions traced from source to destination, authorization memos with signatures and dates, communications between conspirators using coded language that was transparent once you knew what you were looking at. They built it like a legal brief, anticipating every counterargument, closing every potential loophole. Around 1400 hours, Morrison's phone rang. She answered, "Listen," her face going hard as granite. "Understood. Thank you for the warning." She ended the call, looked at Kate and Rachel with eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. That was a friend at Fort Meade. NSA intercepted chatter about this location. There's a team inbound. ETA 90 minutes, maybe less. "How did they find us?" Rachel asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. "Doesn't matter how. What matters is they're coming, and we need to not be here when they arrive." Morrison was already moving, gathering documents, securing the laptop, her movements efficient despite decades since her last field operation. "There's a safe house, old CIA facility, decommissioned officially, but still maintained by people who don't trust the current management. I'll text you the address." "What about you?" Kate asked. "I'm going to make sure this evidence gets where it needs to go, even if I have to hand-deliver it myself." Morrison pulled out a secure phone, began encrypting files for transmission. "Even if they get me, the genie's out of the bottle. The truth exists in too many places for them to suppress it all. General, we should stay together." Morrison's voice was firm. "Multiple targets moving separately makes us harder to track and neutralize. You two get to the safe house. I'll handle the delivery to Thornton and meet you there in 6 hours. If I'm not there by 2100, assume I've been compromised and execute the contingency plan." "What contingency plan?" Rachel asked. "The one where you release everything to every journalist, every foreign government, every possible outlet simultaneously." Morrison smiled grimly. "Scorched earth. If they take me down, I take them down with me." They separated, Kate and Rachel in Kate's car, Morrison in her own vehicle. As they pulled away from the farmhouse, Kate saw in her rearview mirror the general standing on her porch one last time, looking at the home she might never see again. A woman choosing duty over comfort, choosing honor over safety, just like Kate's father had. The drive to the safe house took them through back roads and small towns, constantly checking mirrors for surveillance. Rachel handled navigation while Kate focused on driving, both of them silent with the tension of knowing they were being hunted by people with vast resources and no compunction about violence. They were 20 miles from the safe house when Kate's burner phone rang. She had given the number only to Morrison. She answered on speaker. "It's me." Morrison's voice was tight, controlled, the tone of someone managing pain or fear or both. "I've been made. 3 vehicles on my tail. Professional drivers. They're trying to box me in without making it obvious to civilians." "General, we can double back. Help you." "Negative. This is my play." Morrison's voice was firm despite the circumstances. "I'm going to lead them away from you and the safe house. You get there, make contact with Thornton, deliver that evidence personally." "That's an order, Major." "Ma'am, we can't just leave you." "You're not leaving me. You're completing the mission." Morrison's voice softened slightly. "Tell your students about this, Kate. Teach them that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about being terrified and acting anyway. It's about choosing the mission over personal safety when that choice matters." "General, please." "This is what I should have done 33 years ago, when your father needed backup." Morrison paused, and Kate heard the sound of an engine accelerating. "I'm not making that mistake again. Get to safety, finish this, make sure Jack's sacrifice and my cowardice and all the pain in between actually meant something." The line went dead. Kate and Rachel looked at each other, understanding what Morrison had just done. The general was sacrificing herself to buy them time, to protect them, to ensure the mission succeeded even if she didn't survive it. "We have to keep moving," Rachel said, though tears were running down her face. Kate drove faster, her hands gripping the wheel tight enough to hurt. her mind filled with images of Morrison leading killers away from them through Virginia back roads. Behind them, somewhere in those hills, a three-star general was making a final stand. Ahead, the safe house waited with answers or death or some combination of both. The safe house was a nondescript building in an industrial park outside Richmond. Old warehouse converted to office space, the kind of anonymous structure that could be anything or nothing depending on who was asking. Kate parked in the loading dock area, away from street view, and they approached cautiously, weapons drawn despite being in broad daylight. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was divided into offices and conference rooms, all empty and dust-covered except for one. But in the back, Kate found what Morrison had promised, a secure communications room with encrypted satellite uplink, computer terminals that looked military spec, probably left over from whatever covert operation had originally used this facility, filing cabinets that likely held secrets from missions that officially never happened. And sitting at one of the terminals, waiting for them, was Dr. Elizabeth Graves. The NSC staffer stood when they entered, her face haggard, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept in days. She looked like someone who had been running on nothing but fear and determination and coffee. "Thank God," Graves said, genuine relief in her voice. "I was starting to think you wouldn't make it, that they'd gotten to you first." "What are you doing here?" Kate demanded, her hand moving toward her concealed weapon despite Graves's apparent relief at seeing them. "Same thing you are, trying to stay alive long enough to stop this nightmare." Graves gestured at the terminal behind her. "I've been uploading files to secure servers in 3 different countries. Redundant backups with dead man switches. Even if they kill all of us, the evidence survives and gets released automatically." "Morrison sent us here," Rachel said, still watchful. "She said you'd have a way to reach Inspector General Thornton." "I do." Graves pulled up a map on the terminal, pointed to a location. "Margaret and I have a back channel. We've been talking for weeks about how to move against Nightfall without getting her daughter killed. She's agreed to meet tonight. Midnight. Public space, plenty of witnesses." Kate studied the map. "The Lincoln Memorial, that's very public, also very predictable. It's also defendable and visible. Thornton won't move without assurances that her daughter is safe. I've arranged for that through channels she trusts." Graves' voice was firm. "We get the evidence to her face-to-face. She can protect it through official channels. She has the authority to launch an investigation that even the NSC can't shut down." "What about the timeline?" Kate asked. "You said Operation Nightfall goes active soon." "Tomorrow. Chemical precursors are being delivered to Venezuelan opposition groups as we speak." Graves' face was grim. "Once they're in play, any exposure becomes an international incident that could trigger military intervention. They're accelerating the timeline because they know we're close to stopping them. This is our last chance." "Then we move tonight," Rachel said. Kate looked at these 2 women, a NSC staffer who had risked everything to blow the whistle on her own agency, a young lieutenant who could have stayed quiet and safe but chose to fight. Both of them looking at her for leadership, for decisions that would determine whether they lived or died. She thought about her classroom at the War College, about teaching ethics to officers who would face impossible choices throughout their careers, about whether she had the courage to live by the lessons she taught. "We do it," she said, "but we scout the location first. Identify escape routes and fallback positions. Have backup plans for when the primary plan fails. And if it goes sideways, we scatter and regroup according to a predetermined protocol." Agreed. Graves started gathering equipment from storage lockers Kate hadn't noticed. "I have communications gear, body cameras that upload to secure servers, dead man switches that release everything if our vitals stop. We go in prepared for the worst." "Where's General Morrison?" Graves asked. "I expected her to be with you." Kate told her about the pursuit, about Morrison leading the hunters away, about the call that had ended with the general accelerating into danger instead of away from it. Graves's face went pale. "Patricia Morrison is one of the bravest people I know. If they've taken her, they'll use her as leverage against us at the meet tonight. We need to be ready for that." They spent the next 6 hours planning with the intensity of soldiers preparing for combat, studying maps of the National Mall and the approaches to the Lincoln Memorial, identifying security cameras and blind spots, creating multiple scenarios for how the meeting could go wrong and how they would respond to each one. It was the kind of tactical preparation Kate had done hundreds of times in Delta Force, but never with stakes this personal. never knowing that failure meant not just mission compromise, but the continuation of systematic evil. As evening fell, Graves' phone buzzed. She looked at the message, her face going white. "What?" Rachel asked. "General Morrison. They found her car abandoned outside Petersburg. No sign of her, no blood, no struggle, just the vehicle with the engine still warm." Kate felt her chest constrict. Either Morrison had escaped and gone to ground, or she had been taken alive. Neither option was comforting. If she had escaped, she was out there alone being hunted. If she had been taken, she was being interrogated or held as leverage or worse. "We proceed as planned," Kate said, though her voice shook slightly. "Morrison bought us this chance with whatever she did. We don't waste it by hesitating now." They left the safe house at 2200 hours, driving separately toward Washington, D.C., in different vehicles acquired through Morrison's network. Kate took a circuitous route, doubling back several times, using every counter-surveillance technique she knew. If they were being followed, the tail was professional enough that she couldn't spot them despite 20 years of training. The National Mall at night was beautiful and eerie in equal measure. The monuments lit against the darkness like beacons of American ideals. The reflecting pool mirror smooth, doubling the marble and stone. Tourists and locals walking paths that connected founding principles to present reality. Most of them unaware of the conspiracy playing out in their midst. Kate approached the Lincoln Memorial from the east, moving slowly through patches of shadow and light, scanning constantly for threats both obvious and hidden. Rachel was positioned north with clear sight lines to the meeting point. Graves approached from the south, carrying the evidence in an armored briefcase. Inspector General Margaret Thornton stood at the base of Lincoln's statue, exactly where she had said she would be. Late 50s, African-American, wearing a long coat against the November cold. She stood alone with no visible security detail, looking up at the great emancipator's face as though seeking guidance from history. Kate approached slowly, every sense alert, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. Too quiet, too clean, too perfectly staged. But they were committed now. "Major Callahan," Thornton said without turning, her voice carrying in the stillness. "Dr. Graves, Lieutenant Bishop, thank you for coming. I know how much courage this took." "Ma'am," Kate stopped 3 meters away, maintaining tactical distance. "We have evidence of a criminal conspiracy to commit war crimes. Operation Nightfall. We need your help to stop it before people die." "I know what Operation Nightfall is." Thornton turned to face them, and Kate saw it in her eyes immediately. The knowledge, the resignation, the choice already made under duress. "I've known about it for 6 months. The question has never been whether I know. The question is whether I have the power to stop it without destroying everyone I love." Kate felt the world shifting beneath her feet, the ground becoming uncertain. "You knew? All this time you knew and did nothing?" "The Inspector General of the Department of Defense knows about everything eventually." Thornton's voice was gentle, almost apologetic, which somehow made it worse. "The question isn't whether I know. It's whether I have the power to act without consequences I'm not willing to accept." "You have statutory authority," Graves said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You can launch investigations, compel testimony, refer cases for prosecution. That's literally your job. I can do all those things if I'm alive and free to do them." Thornton pulled out her phone, showed them a photograph that made Kate's stomach turn. It was General Morrison, bound to a chair in what looked like a basement, very much alive, but clearly a prisoner. And my daughter Sarah, also very much alive, also very much in their custody. Kate stared at the image of Morrison, at the defiance still visible in the general's eyes despite the circumstances, at the courage it must take to maintain that defiance, knowing what was coming. "They have Patricia," Thornton said quietly. "They have my daughter. They have leverage on 6 members of my investigative staff. They have recordings and documents that could destroy careers and lives. And they have made it very clear what happens if I don't cooperate with their requirements." "So you're just going to let it happen?" Rachel's voice shook with fury and disappointment. "Let them run the operation, kill innocent people, start a war, all to protect yourself and your family? Not to protect myself. To protect the people I love." Thornton's eyes were wet. "You think I want this? You think I don't know what I'm becoming by staying silent? But I'm not Jack Callahan. I'm not built to sacrifice my daughter for abstract principles, no matter how important those principles might be." "My father died for those principles," Kate said quietly. "I know, and I'm deeply sorry, truly. But I have different choices and different calculations to make. Thornton gestured toward the darkness beyond the monument lights. They're here right now, watching us, waiting to see if you'll surrender the evidence or if they need to take it by force and eliminate loose ends. Kate looked around, saw nothing obvious, but felt the weight of hostile attention pressing down on them from multiple directions. Snipers, probably. Surveillance teams. People who could disappear 3 women and make it look like an accident or mugging or anything other than state-sanctioned murder. "What do you want from us?" Graves asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "The evidence, all copies, all backups, all files. Give it up and walk away. Live your lives. Forget you ever heard of Operation Nightfall or Echo Protocol or any of this." Thornton's voice was pleading now. "It's the only way I can protect my daughter. The only way you survive. And if we refuse?" Thornton looked genuinely pained. "Then they kill you. And they kill General Morrison. And they kill my daughter Sarah. And Operation Nightfall proceeds anyway because your sacrifice achieves nothing except more bodies and more grief." Kate thought about her father standing in that Baghdad safe house, knowing his refusal would likely cost him everything. About whether dying for nothing was better than living with compromise. About whether there was always another choice or whether sometimes the options really were that stark. "There's always another way," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "Not this time." Thornton held out her hand. "Please, Major, I'm begging you. Give me the evidence and go home. Teach your students. Honor your father's memory by surviving to tell his story. That's the best any of us can do in this situation." Kate looked at Rachel, saw her own conflict mirrored in the young woman's face. Looked at Graves, who had risked her career to be here. 3 women at the intersection of principle and pragmatism, trying to find a path that didn't end in blood and failure. "We need a minute," Kate said. "You have 5. Thornton stepped away, giving them privacy that was probably an illusion given the surveillance. Kate turned to her companions, keeping her voice low. "What do you think?" "I think we're outgunned and outmaneuvered and outplayed," Graves said. "But I also think if we give up now, we'll spend the rest of our lives wondering what would have happened if we'd been braver." "My father chose courage, and it got him killed," Rachel said. "Your father did the same. Maybe survival is its own kind of courage. Maybe knowing when to retreat is wisdom rather than cowardice. Or maybe wisdom is just another word for giving up when the fight gets hard." Kate pulled out her phone, the secure one Morrison had given her before they separated. Made a call she had hoped she wouldn't have to make. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Calm, professional, utterly unsurprised. "Major Callahan, I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." It was Mitchell, the man who had threatened her, the voice of the people running Operation Nightfall. "I want to make a deal," Kate said, her mind racing ahead even as the words left her mouth. There was a pause, then quiet laughter that sounded genuinely amused. "I'm listening, Major. This should be interesting." "General Morrison, Inspector General Thornton's daughter. Everyone you're holding as leverage. You release them unharmed, and I give you the evidence. All of it. Every copy, every backup, every file. And in exchange for this generous offer, you let us live. We walk away from this. Keep our mouths shut. Pretend none of it ever happened. Go back to our normal lives and never speak of this again." Another pause, longer this time. "Why should I believe you'll keep that bargain? What stops you from making more copies and releasing them later?" "Because I'm tired," Kate said, making her voice carry conviction even as her mind worked through angles and possibilities. "Because I've lost too many people to fights I can't win. Because I want to go back to teaching and forget that people like you exist in positions of power." "You have 1 hour," Mitchell said, his voice businesslike now. "There's a parking garage 2 blocks north of your position, sublevel 3. Bring the evidence. Come alone. We'll make the exchange." Everyone walks away alive. The line went dead. Kate looked at Rachel and Graves. "You're not seriously considering this," Graves said. "I'm considering staying alive long enough to figure out another option." Kate ejected the USB drive from her phone, handed it to Rachel. "This is a copy. Not the only one, but Mitchell doesn't know that. You hold on to it while I make the exchange." "And then what?" Rachel demanded. "You think they'll actually let any of us walk away after we've seen and heard everything we have? Then we find out if survival is possible or if honor requires sacrifice." Kate checked her watch. 55 minutes. "Let's move." The parking garage was exactly what she expected. Concrete and shadows and the smell of exhaust and urban decay. Kate descended to sublevel 3 alone, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness, each echo marking another step toward a confrontation that would end in either compromise or catastrophe. A black SUV sat in the center of the level, engine running, windows tinted dark. As Kate approached, the rear door opened with the smooth mechanism of expensive engineering. A man stepped out, late 40s, fit in a way that suggested regular gym time and good genetics, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the weapon under his jacket. Mitchell, presumably. The voice from the phone calls made flesh. Major Callahan, he said, his voice exactly as calm and professional as it had been on the phone. Punctual. I appreciate that quality in people. Where's Morrison? Where's Thornton's daughter? Mitchell gestured to the SUV with a casual wave. Safe, alive, unharmed, ready to be released the moment I verify you've brought everything as promised. How do I know you won't kill us all anyway after you get what you want? You don't. But I'm a practical man, Major. Mitchell smiled, and there was something genuinely friendly in his expression that was somehow more disturbing than hostility would have been. Dead bodies create problems. Police investigations, media attention, families asking uncomfortable questions. Living people who keep quiet create opportunities. Business continues, everyone survives. I vastly prefer opportunities to problems. Kate set the briefcase on the hood of the SUV, the metallic sound loud in the concrete silence. Here's everything. Financial records, authorization memos, communications. The complete case against Operation Nightfall laid out in excruciating detail. Mitchell opened the briefcase with steady hands, pulled out a tablet, began scrolling through files with the careful attention of someone who understood what he was looking at. His expression never changed, but Kate saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly as he reviewed the evidence. This is very thorough, he said finally, his voice carrying a note of genuine professional respect. Almost too thorough, which makes me wonder if you kept copies as insurance. No copies, Kate lied with a conviction she didn't feel. We just want out. We want to go back to our lives and forget any of this ever happened. Smart woman. Mitchell closed the briefcase with a decisive click. General Morrison will be released at a location I'll text you within the hour. Inspector General Thornton's daughter will be home by morning. None the worse for her experience. And you get to go back to your classroom and pretend you're making a difference teaching ethics to officers who will ignore the lessons the moment they become inconvenient. One more thing, Kate said. I want to know why. Why is Operation Nightfall worth all this? Worth killing a senator? Threatening a general? Destroying lives and careers? What's the end game that makes it all worthwhile? Because it works, Major. Mitchell's voice carried absolute conviction, the certainty of someone who had never doubted the righteousness of his cause. Echo Protocol justified our presence in Iraq for 2 decades. Billions in defense contracts, hundreds of thousands of miles, American influence across the Middle East, regional stability enforced at gunpoint when necessary. All because we were willing to sacrifice 6 scientists for the greater strategic good. They were innocent people who trusted us. They were acceptable losses in a much larger game, just like the people who die in Venezuela will be acceptable losses. Mitchell's voice never wavered. That's how the world actually works, Major. Not the sanitized version you teach your students. The real version, where hard men make hard choices so soft people can sleep safely in their beds. My father refused to be that kind of hard man. And where did that get him? Mitchell gestured at the briefcase. Face down in Mogadishu while men like me continue doing the necessary work that keeps America powerful and Americans safe. Honor is expensive, Major. Your father paid the price. You're smart enough to learn from his mistake rather than repeat it. Kate felt rage building but forced it down, channeled it into focus. She needed Mitchell to believe he had won, needed him to let his guard drop just enough. You're right, she said quietly. I'm tired of paying for other people's principles. I just want peace. Then we have a deal. Mitchell extended his hand with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. Kate shook it, felt the smooth confidence in his grip, the certainty of victory. He didn't know about the backup files Graves had uploaded to servers in 3 countries. Didn't know about the copies Rachel still carried. Didn't know that this exchange was theater designed to buy time and create opportunity. The SUV door opened. General Morrison stepped out, her face bruised and cut, her uniform torn, but her spine straight and her eyes burning with defiance. She looked at Kate with understanding and approval and something that might have been pride. Patricia, Mitchell said pleasantly, you're free to go. I trust you'll be discreet about your recent accommodations and the excellent hospitality we provided. Go to hell, Morrison said, her voice steady despite obvious pain. Eventually, perhaps, but not today. Mitchell got into the SUV, his movements relaxed and satisfied. Enjoy your retirement, ladies. Remember, we're watching, always watching. One hint that you violated our agreement, and the consequences will be severe and permanent. The SUV pulled away, leaving Kate and Morrison standing in the concrete emptiness of sub-level 3. For a long moment, neither spoke. Did you give them everything? Morrison asked finally, her voice rough. A copy. Kate pulled out her phone. Graves uploaded the real files to secure servers in multiple countries, sent encrypted odd copies to journalists in 6 different organizations, set up dead man switches that release everything automatically if we're killed or disappeared. So the evidence still exists and they don't know it yet. We bought ourselves maybe 12 hours before they figure out they've been played. Kate smiled grimly. We need to use that time wisely. To do what? To finish what my father started 33 years ago. Morrison pulled out her own phone, began making calls despite the late hour. I know people. Real patriots, not the monsters who hide behind that word. We get the evidence to the right hands, create enough noise that suppressing it becomes impossible, and maybe we stop Operation Nightfall before it goes active. They walked toward the exit together, 2 soldiers who had chosen the hard path, knowing it might lead to their deaths but unable to choose otherwise. Behind them in the darkness of sub-level 3, the game continued. But the pieces had moved in ways the other side didn't expect. And in the shadows of Washington, D.C., the real battle was just beginning. The safe house had the stale air of a place forgotten by official channels, but remembered by those who needed it. Kate Callahan sat at the scarred wooden table reviewing files while the first gray light of dawn crept through gaps in the blackout curtains, painting everything in shades of exhaustion and determination. Across from her, General Patricia Morrison nursed coffee that had gone cold hours ago, her bruised face a testament to interrogation techniques that officially didn't exist. Dr. Elizabeth Graves worked at the communications terminal with fingers that moved across keyboards with frantic precision, someone who knew they were running out of time measured in hours rather than days. Rachel Bishop stood guard at the window, watching the street below for signs of surveillance, or worse, barely slept in 3 days, existing on caffeine and the burning need to finish what their fathers had started. They had maybe 8 hours before Mitchell and his network realized they had been deceived in that parking garage. 8 hours to turn evidence into action, information into justice, secrets into weapons that could stop Operation Nightfall before chemical weapons reached Venezuela, and another cycle of manufactured crisis began. The files Graves had uploaded told a story of systematic corruption spanning 3 decades and multiple administrations. Shell companies moving money through Caribbean banks and European financial centers. Defense contractors profiting from wars they helped create through lobbying and campaign contributions. Government officials authorizing operations that violated every principle America claimed to defend internationally. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and completely useless unless they could get it to people with the power and courage to act. I've made contact with 6 journalists in the past 4 hours, Graves said without turning from her terminal. 3 major newspapers, 2 television networks, 1 independent investigative outfit that specializes in national security reporting. All of them have received encrypted files through secure channels. All of them are verifying sources and checking facts. Will they actually publish? Morrison asked, her voice roughened by whatever had happened during her captivity. 2 of them will for certain. The Washington Chronicle and CBS News. They're already drafting stories, conducting interviews, building comprehensive packages. Graves finally turned to face them, her face showing every sleepless hour. The others are nervous about national security implications and possible prosecution under espionage laws. We need something more, something that makes this impossible to ignore or suppress through legal threats. Kate thought about her classroom at the Army War College, about teaching ethics to officers who would inherit the military-industrial complex these files exposed, about whether academic discussions of morality mattered when the real world operated on principles of power and profit rather than justice and accountability. We need congressional testimony, she said. Someone willing to go on record under oath in a public forum. Someone with credibility they can't easily dismiss as a conspiracy theorist or disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. Who? Rachel asked from her position by the window. Everyone with direct knowledge is either dead like Senator Vance, compromised like Inspector General Thornton, or part of the conspiracy itself. Not everyone. Morrison stood, moved to the window beside Rachel, her movements stiff from injuries sustained during interrogation. There's one person who knows everything about both Echo Protocol and Operation Nightfall. Someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain from finally telling the truth. Who? Mrs. Morrison's voice carried the weight of a decision made after long consideration. I was part of the Joint Task Force in 1991. I knew about Echo Protocol from the beginning. I stayed silent for 33 years, out of fear and careerism and cowardice. Time I stopped being a coward and started being the officer Jack Callahan believed I could be. Ma'am, that will destroy your reputation, Kate said. Everything you built over 3 decades of honorable service will be overshadowed by your silence about Echo. My reputation was built on silence about murder. Morrison turned to face them, and Kate saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A kind of peace that comes from finally choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Jack Callahan tried to stand up and died for it. Raymond Bishop tried to make amends and died from guilt. I've lived long enough in comfort built on their graves. Better to die with honor than keep living with shame. The Senate Intelligence Committee won't give you a hearing on 8 hours' notice, Graves said practically. They need time to prepare, to coordinate with legal counsel, to manage the political implications. No, but the House Oversight Committee might. Morrison pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts accumulated over decades in Washington. The chairman, Congressman David Chen, owes me a significant favor from when I testified about Afghanistan withdrawal and gave him political cover. Very significant favor. I'm calling it in right now. She made the call, speaking with the clipped authority of someone used to being obeyed, even in retirement. Kate listened to one side of a conversation that started skeptical and ended with Morrison dictating terms rather than requesting permission. 1,400 hours today, Morrison said after ending the call. Open session, nationally televised on C-SPAN and available to all networks. He's terrified of what I might say, but more terrified of looking like he's covering something up or protecting conspirators. That's 6 hours from now, Rachel said. They'll try to stop us before then. Mitchell and his people won't just let you walk into Congress and testify. Of course they will try, which is why we're not waiting here to be found. Morrison started gathering files, preparing for movement. We go to Capitol Hill immediately. Set up in Chairman Chen's office under congressional protection. Make ourselves visible to staff and press. Surround ourselves with witnesses. They can't disappear, us, if everyone's watching and cameras are recording. What about Operation Nightfall? Kate asked. Even if you testify, even if the story breaks nationally, the chemical precursors are already in transit to Venezuela. The operation could still proceed even if the architects go to prison afterward. Graves looked up from her terminal with a grim smile that suggested she had done something either brilliant or catastrophically illegal. About that particular problem. I may have done something 2 hours ago that will get me arrested if it doesn't get me killed first. What did you do? Morrison asked, though her tone suggested she might not want to know the answer. I still have access to certain NSC systems. Not officially anymore, but my credentials haven't been revoked yet because bureaucracy moves slowly. 2 hours ago, I sent a flash message through intelligence channels to the Venezuelan government. Graves's voice was steady, despite the magnitude of what she was confessing. Told them exactly where and when the opposition groups were receiving chemical weapons materials from American sources, complete with documentation proving our involvement. Jesus Christ, Morrison breathed. That's treason. Giving classified operational intelligence to a foreign government. They'll prosecute you under the Espionage Act. That's preventing mass murder and stopping an illegal war. Graves shut down her terminal, began wiping drives with the methodical care of someone who understood digital forensics. The Venezuelan military will intercept the shipment within hours, arrest everyone involved, seize the materials. The whole operation collapses and becomes an international scandal instead of a secret war that kills thousands. They'll prosecute you, Kate said. Federal prison for decades. I know. But at least people will be alive to prosecute me instead of dead from chemical weapons attacks blamed on a government we want to overthrow. Graves pulled a thumb drive from the terminal, handed it to Kate. This is everything. Every file, every backup, every piece of evidence. If I don't make it to that hearing alive, You deliver it to Chairman Chen personally. We're all making it, Rachel said with more confidence than the situation warranted. They left the safe house in two vehicles, Morrison and Graves in one, Kate and Rachel in the other. The drive to Capitol Hill took them through morning rush hour traffic, thousands of federal workers heading to offices where they would implement policies and procedures that kept the machinery of government running. Most of them decent people who believed they were serving their country and making the world better. None of them knowing how deeply corruption had infected the institutions they trusted. Kate's phone rang, unknown number from a Fort Bragg area code. She almost didn't answer, then recognized the pattern. Major Callahan, a familiar voice said. Captain James Morrison from your ethics class. The young officer who had been skeptical at first, but gradually understanding. Captain, how did you get this number? Ma'am, I need to tell you something urgent. There are people asking questions about you here at Bragg. Official inquiries from DOD Inspector General's office and JAG. They're saying you've stolen classified material, that you're mentally unstable following trauma, that you might be a national security threat. Who's saying this? I don't know the source, but it's coming from very high up the chain of command. They're building a case against you for court-martial. Morrison's voice dropped lower. Ma'am, some of us in your class have been talking about what you taught us, about conscience and duty and standing up when it matters, even if it costs everything. What are you saying, Captain? I'm saying we believe you. Whatever you're doing, whatever they're accusing you of, we don't think you're a traitor. And if you need support, if you need people to speak up or testify or stand with you, you've got at least 20 officers from your classes who are ready. We learned the lessons you taught us, ma'am. Time to prove we meant it. Kate felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know, more than I can express right now. What you taught us matters, ma'am. The principles matter. Don't let them make you doubt that or convince you that honor is naive. The call ended. Kate looked at Rachel, who had heard everything on speaker. You're reaching them, Rachel said quietly. The next generation. You're teaching them what your father tried to teach his generation but didn't live long enough to see take root. If we survive long enough for it to matter. Kate turned onto Constitution Avenue, the Capitol dome rising before them like a promise of accountability that felt increasingly fragile. They reached the Rayburn House office building at 0900 through a side entrance. Morrison's contact, Congressman David Chen, met them personally with two Capitol police officers for security. Chen was 60 years old, a former federal prosecutor who had built his political career on exposing corruption in both parties. His face was grim. General, I've been getting calls for the past hour. Very powerful people, very upset about this hearing. They're threatening everything from national security violations to contempt of Congress if I proceed. Are you going to back down? Morrison asked directly. Hell no, Chen's jaw set with determination. I've been in Congress 20 years waiting for someone to have the courage to testify about what really happens in the shadows of national security. You're giving me that chance. We're doing this even if it costs me my career. They set up in Chen's office suite, surrounded by his staff and a growing number of reporters who had gotten word that something significant was happening. Kate watched through the window as camera crews set up in the hallway, as other members of Congress began arriving to observe, as the machinery of public attention slowly built momentum. Morrison spent 3 hours preparing her testimony with Chen's lawyers, making sure every word could be substantiated with documentary evidence, every claim backed by files they could show. Graves worked with technical staff to set up presentations of the files, creating visual narratives of corruption that would be impossible to dismiss as confusion or misunderstanding. At 1300 hours, Kate's phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell. You played me. That was clever. But you haven't won. Call off the hearing or face consequences you cannot imagine. Kate showed the message to Morrison. Empty threat, the general said. We're in the Capitol building, surrounded by witnesses, press, congressional security. They can't touch us here without creating a national incident. They killed my father in the middle of a battle with the world watching, Kate said. Don't underestimate what they're willing to do when their interests are threatened. Then we better make sure the truth gets out before they can try anything. Morrison stood, straightened her uniform. She had dressed in full regalia, 3 stars gleaming on her shoulders, ribbons from 3 decades of service covering her chest, decorations for valor and leadership earned in Iraq and Afghanistan. She looked like everything the military was supposed to represent: honor, duty, sacrifice. The hearing room filled quickly beyond capacity, press in the gallery with cameras and notebooks, congressional staffers lining the walls, C-SPAN cameras broadcasting live to anyone who cared to watch. Kate sat in the front row with Rachel, both of them in dress uniforms, both of them knowing they were about to cross a line from which there was no return. Congressman Chen gavelled the hearing to order at precisely 1400 hours, his voice carrying across the packed room. This emergency session of the House Oversight Committee has been called to investigate allegations of criminal conspiracy within elements of the United States government. His voice carried the weight of constitutional authority. Our witness today is General Patricia Morrison, United States Army, retired. General Morrison has invoked whistleblower protections and has been granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for truthful testimony under oath. Morrison was sworn in with her right hand raised, her left hand on a Bible that had belonged to her grandfather, who served in World War II. She sat ramrod straight, her hands folded on the table in front of her eyes steady as she looked at the committee members and the cameras beyond them broadcasting to the nation. General Morrison Chen began, his voice formal but respectful. Please tell this committee what you know about Operation Echo Protocol. Morrison took a breath, and Kate saw 33 years of silence preparing to break like a dam that had finally cracked under too much pressure. In February 1991, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. I was a captain serving as a logistics officer for a joint CIA and Department of Defense task force operating in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. My official job was to coordinate supply chains and transportation for what I was told were standard military operations supporting the war effort. What I discovered was that we were facilitating the sale of chemical weapons precursors to Iraqi scientists who believed they were working with our approval. The room erupted immediately. Reporters shouting questions, committee members calling for order, spectators reacting with shock or anger. Chen gavelled repeatedly for silence. Kate watched Morrison sit calmly through the case, waiting with the patience of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind for decades. When order was restored, Morrison told the whole story without notes or hesitation. The recruitment of Iraqi scientists by CIA, the sale of chemical precursor materials through shell companies, the plan to create evidence of weapons of mass destruction that would justify prolonged American military presence, the order to eliminate the scientists when they became security liabilities, Sergeant First Class Jack Callahan's refusal to murder people under American protection, his death in Mogadishu 2 years later, that wasn't combat casualty, but assassination. She spoke for 2 hours without interruption, her memory precise about dates and names and conversations, her voice never wavering even when describing events that clearly still caused her pain. She named names without hesitation, cited classified documents she had seen, described meetings and decisions that painted a comprehensive picture of systematic criminality at the highest levels. And when she finished with Echo Protocol, she continued without pause. Operation Echo was not an isolated incident or rogue operation, she said, her voice taking on even greater intensity. It was a template, a proven business model. For the past 33 years, elements within our military and intelligence communities have been running similar operations under different names, creating threats to justify interventions, profiting from the chaos, silencing anyone who threatened to expose the pattern. She described Operation Nightfall in detail. The chemical weapons precursors being supplied to Venezuelan opposition groups through the same networks that ran Echo. The planned exposure of the Venezuelan government as the source, the justification for American intervention that would follow, the billions in defense contracts that would result, the campaign contributions that would flow to key congressional supporters. Graves came forward at Morrison's signal, began presenting evidence on screens throughout the room. Financial transactions traced through multiple jurisdictions, authorization memos with signatures of current officials, intercepted communications between conspirators, a trail of corruption that led from Baghdad in 1991 to Caracas today, showing the same pattern repeated with minor variations. Kate watched the faces of committee members as evidence accumulated, saw shock that appeared genuine on some faces, disbelief on others, anger that might have been real or performed, calculation as some began planning how to spin this, how to protect allies or distance themselves from implicated officials. The hearing lasted 6 hours with only brief recesses. By the time Morrison finished her prepared testimony, and began answering questions from committee members. The sun was setting over Washington. Cable news had interrupted regular programming to broadcast the proceedings live. Social media was exploding with reactions ranging from outrage to skepticism. The story was out, spreading too fast and too far to contain through normal suppression channels. As the committee finally adjourned with promises to continue investigation, Kate felt her phone buzzing continuously. Messages from former colleagues asking if it was true. From her students expressing support or confusion. From reporters seeking comment or additional information. From anonymous numbers that were probably threats. One message stood out among the noise. From an unknown number, just 3 words that made her chest tighten. Your father's daughter. She showed it to Morrison as they were escorted from the Capitol by federal marshals assigned to protect them from threats both credible and implied. Who sent that? Morrison asked. I don't know. But whoever it was, they understood what we just accomplished. They emerged from the Capitol building to chaos. Reporters surging forward with microphones and cameras. Questions shouted from every direction. Camera flashes creating strobing light. The federal marshals created a corridor through the crowd toward waiting vehicles. That's when Kate saw him standing at the edge of the crowd. Mitchell. Their eyes met across 30 meters of chaos. He raised a hand in mocking salute, then disappeared into the evening crowd like smoke. He's not going to let this go, Rachel said, having seen the exchange. Number. But he can't stop it now. Morrison climbed into the waiting SUV. The truth is out. All he can do is try to survive the fallout and minimize damage to himself and his network. The next 72 hours were a blur of activity that would reshape American politics and military oversight for a generation. The evidence Morrison and Graves had presented triggered investigations across multiple federal agencies. FBI raided offices at the Pentagon and CIA headquarters. Department of Justice impaneled grand juries in 3 different districts. Congressional committees in both houses launched parallel investigations with subpoena power. 3 members of the National Security Council resigned within 24 hours. 2 CIA section chiefs were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, facing questions about his own knowledge and potential complicity, announced he would not seek re-election. Defense contractors named in the documents saw their stock prices collapse as investors fled exposure. Kate watched it unfold from a secure location provided by federal marshals. She gave depositions to multiple investigators, answered questions from prosecutors building cases, prepared for the trials that would follow. But mostly she watched the machinery of accountability slowly, imperfectly grinding into motion. On the 4th day after the hearing, Inspector General Margaret Thornton appeared on national television. Her daughter safely returned, her leverage removed. She announced a comprehensive investigation into corruption within the Department of Defense with subpoena power and protection from political interference. She was pale and shaking, but her voice carried the weight of someone who had decided to stop being afraid. Operation Nightfall was officially terminated. The Venezuelan government, having intercepted the chemical weapons shipment exactly as Graves had warned them, held an international press conference showing the materials and documentation proving American involvement. The diplomatic fallout was severe, with demands for United Nations investigation and calls for sanctions. But war had been prevented. Innocent people who would have died in manufactured chaos were still alive. Dr. Elizabeth Graves was arrested at her home on charges of unauthorized disclosure of classified information and providing intelligence to a foreign government. Her perp walk was broadcast on every news channel, federal marshals leading her away in handcuffs, while she held her head high and refused to show shame. Kate attended her arraignment, sat in the front row where Graves could see her, silently promising that the sacrifice would not be forgotten or wasted. 2 weeks after her hearing, Kate returned to the Army War College expecting to find her office cleaned out, her position terminated, her career in ruins. Instead, she found a letter from the commandant waiting on her desk. Major Callahan, the letter read in formal language. Your actions over the past month have been reviewed by this command in consultation with Department of Army leadership. While we cannot officially condone all the methods you employed, we recognize that you acted in accordance with the highest traditions of military service and the values we profess to hold. Your position at this institution is secure for as long as you wish to hold it. Teach our officers well. We need more like you, not fewer. Her first class after returning was packed beyond the room's capacity. Not just her regular students, but officers from across the college who had heard about the hearings and wanted to understand what had driven one of their own to risk everything. Kate stood at the front of the room, looking at faces that ranged from hostile to admiring to uncertain, and everything between. She pulled up a photograph on the screen behind her. Not her father this time, but General Morrison in full uniform sitting ramrod straight at the witness table before Congress, about to destroy her reputation to expose the truth. 3 weeks ago, Kate began, General Patricia Morrison committed career suicide. She exposed crimes that had been hidden for 33 years. She implicated powerful people who could destroy her. She did it knowing she would be vilified by some, investigated by others, possibly prosecuted, despite immunity agreements. She did it anyway. Why? A voice from the back. Captain Morrison, who had called to warn her. Why would she do that when silence was safer? Because she made a promise to a dead man 33 years ago. Because she believed truth mattered more than comfort or reputation. Because she understood that some choices define who we are at our core. Kate clicked to the next slide, showing a quote she had printed in large letters across the screen. The question isn't whether you can afford the price of honor. It's whether you can afford the price of dishonor. The class sat in silence, processing what she was saying, understanding for perhaps the first time that ethics wasn't abstract philosophy, but concrete choices with real consequences that could destroy careers or save lives, or both simultaneously. Over the next 6 months, trials began in federal courts. 4 NSC members were indicted on conspiracy charges that would take years to fully prosecute. 2 CIA section chiefs faced charges for unauthorized covert operations and obstruction of justice. Defense contractors settled civil suits for billions in damages to be distributed to victims of conflicts they had profited from creating. Mitchell disappeared entirely, either into witness protection programs or into shadows from which he had emerged. His fate unknown, but his network shattered. But not destroyed. Kate knew better than to believe that corruption could be eliminated rather than merely disrupted temporarily. The people who profited from perpetual war would find new ways to create it, new justifications to offer, new networks to exploit. The difference now was that a generation of young officers had seen what happened when someone stood up against the system, had seen that resistance was possible and sometimes successful, had learned that duty sometimes meant disobedience. General Morrison was not prosecuted despite her admitted complicity in Echo Protocol. Public opinion, swayed by her courageous testimony and decades of subsequent honorable service, made her politically untouchable. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in a ceremony that she almost declined, uncomfortable with praise for what she considered merely belated decency. Dr. Elizabeth Graves was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to reduced charges. Kate visited her every month along with Rachel and a growing number of supporters who saw her not as traitor, but as patriot who had prevented war. Graves spent her time writing a book about government secrecy and democratic accountability that would later become required reading at the War College. 1 year after the hearings, Kate stood at Arlington National Cemetery on a cold November morning that reminded her of too many farewells. She was not alone. Rachel Bishop stood beside her, now a captain herself preparing to deploy with Delta Force. General Morrison, looking older but somehow lighter, as if testifying had lifted weights she had carried for decades. A dozen of Kate's students, young officers who had asked to come and pay respects to a soldier they had never met, but whose example had shaped them. They stood before Jack Callahan's grave, the white stone weathered by 3 decades of seasons, surrounded by graves of other soldiers who had served and died. Kate had brought flowers, the same kind her father used to bring her mother before deployments back when she was too young to understand that goodbye might be permanent. "I finished what you started, Dad," she said quietly, aware of the others listening but speaking to him alone. "Took 33 years longer than it should have. Cost too many good people, too much. But Echo Protocol is exposed. Operation Nightfall is stopped. The people responsible are being held accountable. The system is changing, slowly but changing." General Morrison stepped forward, placed her own flowers at the grave with shaking hands. "I'm sorry, Jack," she said, her voice breaking. "Sorry I stayed silent for so long. Sorry I didn't have your courage when it mattered most. But I want you to know your daughter does. She has everything you hoped she would be, and more. She finished the mission you started." Rachel was crying quietly but made no effort to hide it. She stepped forward, touched the headstone with gentle fingers. "I never knew you, Sergeant Callahan, but I know what you stood for. what you died for. My father killed you, and that act destroyed him from the inside. But maybe some good came from all the pain. Maybe your sacrifice and his guilt and all the grief created something better than what existed before. I have to believe that. Need to believe that meaning can emerge from tragedy. The students stood at attention, rendering salute to a Marine they knew only through Kate's stories and Morrison's testimony. But the salute was genuine, tribute to an example more than a man, recognition that the choice he made still echoed and still mattered and still shaped the kind of officers they were trying to become. After the service, an older man approached Kate, late 70s, moving carefully with a cane, his suit marking him as someone who had spent his life in government service, navigating corridors of power. "Colonel Callahan," he said, "I don't know if you remember me from the hearings." Kate studied his face, found recognition. "Congressman David Chen, you made the hearing possible by standing up to pressure from very powerful people. I held a hearing. You and General Morrison changed history." Chen pulled an envelope from his jacket with hands that trembled slightly. "This is from Senator Vance. He left it with me before he died, asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I believe that time is now." Kate opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter in Vance's distinctive handwriting, shaky but legible. "Colonel Callahan," it read, "if you are reading this, I am dead, and you have survived long enough to make a difference. Congratulations on succeeding where your father failed. Not because you were better than him, but because you had allies where he stood alone. Remember that lesson. Honor without support is martyrdom. Honor with community is revolution. I spent my career on the wrong side of that revolution. I helped create systems that valued power over principle, profit over people, secrecy over truth. I told myself it was necessary for national security and American interests. But men like your father understood what I learned too late, that America is not protected by hiding its sins, but by facing them honestly. Continue the work. Teach your students. Support the whistleblowers. Build the networks that make resistance possible and sustainable. And know that every generation faces the same choice your father faced. The question is whether enough people make the right choice quickly enough to matter. I hope they do, for all our sakes. Harold Vance. Kate folded the letter carefully, tucked it into her uniform pocket next to her heart, looked around at the cemetery, at the thousands of white stones marking soldiers who had served, and many of whom had faced their own impossible choices between duty and conscience. She thought about the long war, the one that never ended because it was fought in hearts and minds rather than on battlefields. The war between what was ordered and what was right. The war her father had fought and lost his life, but somehow won by inspiring others to carry on the battle. 15 years after Echo Protocol was exposed and Operation Nightfall was stopped, Kate Callahan retired from the Army as a full colonel. She could have stayed longer, could have pushed for that general's star that political officers suggested was within reach, but she had accomplished what she set out to do. The War College's ethics program had been expanded and made mandatory for all senior officers. Whistleblower protections had been strengthened with real teeth. A new generation of leaders understood that questioning authority was not betrayal, but sometimes the highest form of duty. Her final act in uniform was teaching one last class. The subject was Echo Protocol as historical case study. The students were 40 senior officers, including 3 who had been in her very first class 15 years earlier, now majors and lieutenant colonels themselves carrying forward lessons they had learned. She stood at the front of the room one final time, looking at faces that represented the military's future and hoping it would be better than its past. "When I started teaching this course 15 years ago," she began, "I told you about my father, about his choice in Baghdad when ordered to kill innocents, about his death in Mogadishu that wasn't combat casualty but assassination, about the 33 years it took for truth to emerge from shadows." She clicked to a slide showing a timeline spanning 1991 to present day. 33 years of silence, 3 years of investigation and trials, 15 years of reform and cultural change still ongoing. That timeline represents the cost of delayed justice. 6 scientists who died needlessly. My father who was murdered for refusing to be complicit. Thousands of soldiers and civilians who died in wars justified by lies. Billions of dollars stolen from taxpayers and funneled to contractors. Trust in institutions eroded to the point where citizens no longer believe anything their government tells them. She paused, let the weight of that cost sink into the room. But it also represents the power of persistence, of refusing to forget, of teaching the next generation that silence enables evil and obedience without conscience is not honor. Some of you in this room were taught by officers I taught. You will teach officers who will teach other officers. The lesson spreads. The culture changes. Slowly, imperfectly, but it changes because people refuse to let it stay the same. After the class ended, after the final salutes and handshakes and well wishes from students who understood they had witnessed something significant, Kate walked out of the War College for the last time in uniform. Rachel was waiting for her, now a major herself, recently returned from a deployment where she had questioned mission parameters and prevented what would have been a catastrophic mistake that could have ignited regional war. "What will you do now?" Rachel asked. Kate thought about it carefully, about all the things she had sacrificed for her career and her mission, about the personal life she had never built because duty always came first, about whether there was still time to find something beyond the uniform. "I'm going to visit my father's grave one more time," she said. "Tell him the mission is complete as much as any mission ever truly is. Then I'm going to figure out who Katherine Callahan is when she's not major or colonel or teacher of ethics. You'll always be those things regardless of what you wear. Maybe, but I'd like to find out what else I could be." Kate pulled off her uniform jacket, stood in her service shirt, feeling lighter than she had in decades. "Your turn now. You and your generation. Make sure the lessons stick. Make sure we never have another Echo Protocol or Operation Nightfall." "We won't let you down," Rachel promised with conviction. "I know you won't." Kate embraced the younger woman, this daughter of her father's killer, this sister-in-arms who represented the complicated legacy of honor and guilt and redemption that defined their shared history. "Now go. You have important work ahead." Kate drove to Arlington one final time in civilian clothes, feeling strange and free without the weight of rank on her shoulders or mission on her conscience. She found her father's grave easily despite decades, now weathered and settled among graves of thousands who had served. Sergeant First Class Jack Callahan, 1961 to 1993. The stone gave no hint of the choice he made or the price he paid or the legacy he created through refusal. Kate sat on the grass beside the grave, something she had never done in uniform, feeling earth solid beneath her. "It's done, Dad," she said quietly to stone in memory. Echo Protocol exposed. The people responsible held accountable. The system changed enough that the next person who refuses illegal orders might survive to be vindicated. And the next generation knows your story, knows what you stood for, knows that conscience matters more than career advancement. She pulled out Vance's letter, read it one more time in fading afternoon light. "Honor without support is martyrdom. Honor with community is revolution." "I found the community you never had," she told the Silent Stone. "Found people willing to stand up together. Found students willing to learn and carry forward. Found a way to turn your sacrifice into something that mattered beyond your death and beyond mine." Wind moved through the cemetery carrying distant sounds of the city. Life continuing, indifferent to dramas that played out in corridors of power and hearts of individuals trying to do right in a world that made that choice as hard as possible. Kate stood, brushed grass from her jeans, took one last look at the grave that had defined so much of her life and purpose. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me what courage looks like, for being willing to pay the ultimate price, for refusing to compromise even when it cost you everything. I hope I made you proud." She walked away, then toward a future undefined by her father's death or her own need for vengeance or legacy. Walked toward whatever came next for a woman who had spent her adult life fighting ghosts and teaching lessons and trying to honor a promise made by a man she barely remembered but would never forget. Behind her, the white stones of Arlington stood silent witness to sacrifice and service. Before her, the road stretched toward possibility and peace. And in classrooms, in briefing rooms, and field operations across the military, young officers faced their own impossible choices, their own conflicts between orders and conscience, their own moments of decision that would define who they were and what they believed and what they would become. Some would choose the easy path. Most would because that is human nature and institutional pressure. But some would remember the lesson of Jack Callahan, of Patricia Morrison, of Katherine Callahan and Rachel Bishop and Elizabeth Graves, and all the others who had stood up when standing up cost everything. And that would make all the difference. Not today, not tomorrow, But over years and decades and generations, culture would shift. Institutions would change. The balance would tilt slowly toward a military that valued conscience as much as obedience, that rewarded moral courage as readily as physical bravery, that understood duty sometimes meant saying no to power. That was the long war, the one without end, but with countless small victories. The one that required not heroes but ordinary people making the extraordinary choice to stand for what was right when doing wrong was easier and safer. Katherine Callahan had fought that war for 20 years, had won some battles and lost others, had sacrificed much and gained something precious, knowledge that she had lived by principles she taught. Now it was someone else's turn, someone else's war, someone else's chance to prove that honor still mattered in a world determined to prove otherwise. She drove away from Arlington, from the military that had defined her, from the ghosts that had haunted her, toward whatever came next with gratitude for the fight and relief that it was finally someone else's burden to carry. Behind her on weathered stone in an endless field of stones, her father's name stood as testimony to a choice made 33 years ago that still echoed, still mattered, still shaped the future in ways both large and small and sometimes barely visible. Some battles are never won completely. They are only fought generation after generation by people who refuse to surrender the idea that right and wrong still means something. That truth matters. That conscience is not weakness, but strength. Jack Callahan fought that battle, lost his life, but not his honor or his impact. Katherine Callahan fought that battle, survived to teach others and pass the torch. And somewhere a young officer was preparing to face that same battle, armed with lessons learned from sacrifice and sustained by knowledge that they did not stand alone in the fight. The war continued. It always would. But so did the resistance, and that was enough. Brothers and sisters who served, this story hits different, doesn't it? Major Kate Callahan's fight for truth against a corrupt system mirrors battles many of you faced, when duty to conscience conflicts with following orders. Her father paid the ultimate price for doing what's right. 33 years later, she finished what he started. I want to hear from you veterans down in the comments. Have you ever faced an order that tested your moral compass? How did you handle it? Your experiences matter and younger generations need to hear them. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to hear more tales of honor, brotherhood, and the warriors who stood firm when it cost them everything. Hit that notification bell. I've got more stories about operators who chose principle over career. What should I cover next? Drop your suggestions below. Semper Fi.